The strongbox hit the desert floor with a metallic thud that echoed like a death sentence. Sheriff Caleb Ward stood frozen, his hand hovering above his holster, staring at the wreckage of the diplomatic train. Bodies lay scattered across the sand like forgotten prayers. The sacred white pony, symbol of peace between nations, was gone. In its place, a ransom note nailed to a railroad tie with a Bowie knife. $1 million, 7 days, or the pony dies and war begins. Behind him, shackled and grinning like the devil himself, outlaw Victor Silver Fox Lark whispered, "Well, Sheriff, looks like you need a criminal." Before we ride into the dust and danger of the frontier, I invite you to join me on this journey. If you enjoy this tale of stubborn lawmen, silver-tongued outlaws, and impossible missions, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far across this wild world our story can travel. Now, let's begin. The Arizona Territory had a way of breaking men. It broke them with heat that turned thoughts to ash, with distances that swallowed hope, with a silence so complete you could hear your own sins whispering. Sheriff Caleb Ward had seen it break gamblers, farmers, soldiers, and saints. But in 23 years of wearing a badge, he'd never seen it break the law itself. Until today. He stood at the edge of the massacre site, hat tilted against the morning sun, watching his deputy retch behind a creosote bush. The kid had seen bar fights and claim disputes, but nothing like this. Nothing that smelled like this. Gunpowder and blood baking in 100-degree heat. The metallic stench mixing with the acrid smoke still rising from the derailed train cars. 13 dead, Ward said, his voice flat as the desert horizon. Most shot in the back. His deputy, Tommy Briggs, wiped his mouth and staggered over, face the color of old newspaper. Christ, Sheriff, who does something like this? Men who wanted something bad enough to kill for it. Ward knelt beside the nearest body, a uniformed soldier, young, probably never fired his weapon in anger before today. The badge on Ward's chest caught the sun, throwing a brief flash of light across the corpse's glassy eyes. And they got what they came for. The diplomatic mission had been the talk of the territory for weeks, a gesture of goodwill, they'd called it. The sacred white pony, a gift from a foreign dignitary to the Apache chief Red Hawk, meant to symbolize peace, unity, bridge building between cultures. Ward had thought it was political theater, the kind of grand gesture that meant everything in drawing rooms back east and nothing out here where survival mattered more than symbolism. Now 13 men were dead, and the pony was gone. Ward moved through the wreckage with the methodical patience of a man who'd learned to read violence the way scholars read books. Spent cartridges glinted in the sand. 44 .40 caliber, common enough. Boot prints everywhere. At least a dozen riders. Maybe more. They'd hit fast and hard, probably just after dawn when the train stopped to take on water at Copper Springs. The engineer lay slumped over his controls, 3 bullets in his back. The diplomatic courier had made it 20 feet from the train before they cut him down. His leather satchel lay beside him, empty now, its contents scattered like autumn leaves. Official papers, letters of introduction, a photograph of a stern-looking man in exotic formal dress. And beneath it all, the ransom note. Ward pulled it from where it had been nailed to the railroad tie, the wood still sticky with someone's blood. The handwriting was educated, almost elegant, not the scrawl of common bandits. Each letter formed with care, the threat delivered with the precision of a legal document. To whom it may concern, the sacred pony is in our possession. Payment of $1 million in gold and currency will secure its safe return. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in the animal's death and the resumption of hostilities between the United States Army and the Apache Nation. A courier will be selected. Instructions will follow. Do not involve additional military forces. Do not attempt pursuit. Do not test our resolve. The price of peace has been set. No signature, no mark, nothing but the implicit promise of war if the money didn't arrive. Sheriff? Tommy had recovered enough to approach, though he kept his eyes on Ward rather than the bodies. What do we do? Ward folded the note and slipped it into his vest pocket. We report it. Army'll handle it from here. But nothing. Ward's tone allowed no argument. This is bigger than us. Bigger than our jurisdiction. This is the kind of mess that needs colonels and diplomats, not a county sheriff and a deputy who can't hold down his breakfast. Tommy flushed, but didn't protest. He knew Ward was right. Whatever this was, kidnapping, extortion, potential act of war, it had already climbed beyond the reach of local law enforcement. Ward was 3 steps toward his horse when he heard the voice. My, Sheriff. Quite the predicament. He turned, hand dropping to his Colt .45, and found himself staring at a face that made his jaw tighten. Victor Lark sat on a boulder 20 yards away, wrists and ankles bound with regulation prison chains, grinning like he'd just won a hand of poker with a busted flush. Even filthy from 2 weeks in Ward's jail, even shackled and guarded by 2 armed deputies, the outlaw managed to look relaxed, comfortable, like he was sitting in a hotel lobby rather than at the scene of a massacre. "Lark," Ward said, his voice dropping 10 degrees. "Didn't I tell Deputy Barnes to keep you in the wagon?" "Oh, he tried." Lark's grin widened. He had the kind of face women found handsome and men found dangerous. Sharp features, silver-shot hair despite being only 40, and eyes the color of winter ice. But I pointed out that if whoever did this comes back, I'd rather face them unchained than die like a dog in a cage. Barnes saw the wisdom in that. Deputy Barnes, a thick-shouldered man with more loyalty than imagination, shuffled his feet. "You made a good point, Sheriff, and I figured with the chains, he ain't going nowhere." Ward bit back the reprimand. Barnes was right, even if Lark had manipulated him into it. The outlaw was secured, and if the killers did return, every gun would matter. "Stay quiet," Ward ordered, "or I'll have Barnes gag you with his bandana." "Now that seems excessive." Lark shifted on his boulder, chains clinking softly. "Besides, I might have information relevant to your investigation." "You have information on everything when it suits you, usually lies." "Sometimes lies are just truth told from a different angle, Sheriff." Lark's voice carried that smooth, educated cadence that had helped him talk his way out of more trouble than most outlaws shot their way out of. He'd been a professor once, before whatever darkness lived in him had pulled him toward easier money and harder living. "For instance, that note in your pocket. May I see it?" "No?" "I'll see it eventually. The whole territory will know about this by sunset. Might as well benefit from my expert opinion while it's still exclusive." Ward studied the outlaw for a long moment. Victor Silver Fox Lark. Wanted in 3 territories for robbery, fraud, and at least 1 murder Ward could prove. Smart enough to stay ahead of the law for 5 years, slippery enough to talk himself out of 2 trials, and finally caught because of an informant who'd sold him out for $50 and a bottle of whiskey. Ward had been transporting him to Yuma prison when they'd spotted the smoke from the train. Against every instinct, Ward pulled out the note and held it up, keeping it just out of Lark's reach. The outlaw's eyes moved across the words, quick and intelligent. His grin faded. "Educated hand. Probably Eastern schooling, uses whom correctly, which rules out 90% of the criminals in the territory." "That's your expert opinion?" "That's the opening observation." Lark leaned forward, chains rattling. "Look at the phrasing. Resumption of hostilities. Not start a war or blood will flow." Resumption. Implies previous conflict, suggests historical knowledge. This wasn't written by a common bandit, Sheriff. This was written by someone who understands politics. Ward refolded the note. Lark was right, which irritated him more than being wrong would have. "Doesn't change anything," Ward said. "Still army business." "Except the army won't pay." Lark said it with such certainty that Ward paused. $1 million? "The government will debate, form committees, argue jurisdiction. By the time they decide your 7 days will be gone, the pony will be dead, and every Apache from here to New Mexico will be painted for war." "You don't know that." "I know politics, Sheriff. I know bureaucracy. And I know that whoever planned this understands both." Lark's grin returned, but different now, sharper, with an edge of genuine interest. They chose the sacred pony specifically. Not a general's daughter, not a gold shipment. A symbol. Kill it, and you don't just break a treaty. You humiliate the Apache, anger the foreign dignitary, and give the army an excuse to do what it's been wanting to do anyway. Which is? Clear the Apache out of prime railroad territory. Lark said it like he was discussing the weather. "There's a fortune to be made in expansion, Sheriff, and the Apache are sitting on the most direct route between Tucson and El Paso. This whole thing smells like manufactured crisis." Ward had considered the same possibility, but hearing it from Lark's mouth made it feel more real. more dangerous. Still not our problem, he said, but his conviction had weakened. Before Lark could respond, a rider appeared on the horizon, a hard, fast gallop that sent dust spiraling into the air. Ward's hand went to his weapon, but he recognized the army uniform before the rider got close. Lieutenant Daniels, young and earnest, pulled his horse to a stop, hard enough to make it dance. "Sheriff Ward, thank God. The colonel wants a full report immediately." "Tell him 13 dead, 1 sacred pony stolen," Ransom demanded. Ward handed over the note. "This is Army business now, Lieutenant. We'll provide any assistance requested." Daniels read the note, and his face went white. $1 million. Christ, the colonel will never authorize it. "Then you'd better ride fast," Ward said. "You've got 7 days." The lieutenant wheeled his horse and was gone in seconds, leaving a wake of dust and dread. Ward watched him go, a cold stone settling in his gut. Lark was right about one thing: the army wouldn't pay. They'd strategize, organize, maybe even launch a rescue operation that would likely end with the pony dead and war erupting across the territory. "Sheriff," Tommy's voice was small. "What do we do?" Ward turned to find his deputy, Barnes, and even the shackled Lark all looking at him with the same expression. Waiting. Hoping he had an answer. He didn't. The sound of approaching hoofbeats saved him from having to admit it. Another rider, this one coming from the opposite direction. Not army. The posture was wrong, the saddle different. As the figure resolved out of the heat shimmer, Ward saw a man in strange clothing, a long dark coat despite the temperature, with a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. The rider stopped 20 feet away and dismounted with fluid grace. When he removed his hat, Ward saw Asian features, a face weathered by sun but younger than expected, maybe 30. His coat bore dust from hard travel, and his hands, scarred and calloused, rested near weapons Ward didn't recognize. "I am Kenjiro Sato," the man said, his English crisp but accented. "I serve the dignitary whose gift has been stolen. I have come to retrieve it." Ward studied him. "This is a crime scene, Mr. Sato. Army jurisdiction. You'll need to—" "The army will fail." Sato's interruption was quiet but absolute. "They will debate while time passes. They will plan while the sacred pony suffers. This is not their way. It is not acceptable." "And what is your way?" "I will find those responsible. I will recover what was stolen. I will do what honor demands." Sato's hand moved to his coat, and every deputy reached for their guns. But what he withdrew was a letter, sealed with wax and official stamps. "I have authorization to act on behalf of the dignitary. I request only that local law enforcement not interfere." Ward took the letter, broke the seal, and read. It was legitimate, signed by the dignitary, countersigned by the territorial governor, granting Kenjiro Sato authority to pursue recovery of the stolen property by any means necessary. "This doesn't change Army jurisdiction," Ward said, handing it back. "I do not seek to change it. I seek only to succeed where they will fail." Sato's eyes moved past Ward to the train wreckage, to the bodies, to the blood-soaked sand. Something flickered across his face. Not fear, but something deeper. Shame, maybe. Or determination. "The sacred pony represents more than politics, Sheriff. It represents trust between peoples. If that trust dies, something precious is lost forever." "Pretty words," Lark called from his boulder. "But these killers are professionals, and the frontier is vast. One man, no matter how determined, won't find them in 7 days." Sato turned to regard the chained outlaw with cool assessment. "Perhaps, but I will die trying." "That is the difference between men who talk and men who act." Lark's grin could have cut glass. "Oh, I like him, Sheriff. He's got spirit." Ward ignored them both, his mind working through possibilities, all of them bad. The army wouldn't pay. Sato would likely die trying to be a hero. The pony would be killed, and war would come to the territory like a prairie fire, unstoppable and consuming everything. Unless the thought formed before he could stop it, unwanted and dangerous as a rattlesnake in a bedroll. "Sheriff?" Tommy was watching him with concern. "You got that look?" "What look?" "The one you get right before you do something stubborn." Ward almost smiled. The kid knew him too well. He looked at the wreckage, at the bodies, at the ransom note's implicit threat. 13 good men dead, a symbol of peace stolen, 7 days until everything went to hell. The army had protocols. The diplomats had process. The politicians had committees. Ward had something simpler. He had a badge and a belief, maybe foolish, maybe outdated, but bedrock solid, that the law meant something even when the wilderness laughed at it. "Deputy Briggs," he said quietly, "ride to town. Tell my wife I'll be delayed." "Delayed how long?" 7 days? Maybe more. Tommy's eyes widened. "Sheriff, you can't be thinking—" "I'm not thinking anything yet." Ward turned to Sato. "You have tracking skills?" The warrior nodded once. "And you," Ward addressed Lark, "you claim to know how criminals think." "I am a criminal, Sheriff." "Present tense." Lark's chains clinked as he shifted. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ward took a breath, knowing that what came next would either save the territory or destroy what remained of his career. Possibly both. "The ransom note says a courier will be selected. Someone to carry the money through hostile territory to wherever these killers are hiding." He met each man's eyes in turn. "I'm going to volunteer." Silence. Even the desert wind seemed to pause. "You're insane," Tommy breathed. "The army won't authorize $1 million, Ward continued, "but they might authorize a decoy payment. Enough real money to be convincing. The rest waited to feel right. I carry it through whatever route these killers specify, and along the way, we track them," Sato said, understanding dawning. "Follow their instructions, but watch for signs. They will need to verify the courier, observe from distance, leave traces." "Exactly," Ward turned to Lark. "And I'll need someone who thinks like they do, someone who can anticipate their moves, spot their tricks." Lark's grin was pure devilish delight. "Sheriff Caleb Ward, are you actually proposing we work together, after 3 years of you chasing me across the territory?" "I'm proposing I use every resource available." "You're a resource. A dangerous, untrustworthy resource I'll be watching every second, but a resource nonetheless. And in exchange? You help recover the pony, you might find a judge more lenient at sentencing." "Might?" "I'm not making promises I can't keep, Lark. You're still going to prison. Question is whether it's 5 years or 15. The outlaw considered this, silver-shot hair glinting in the sun. Around them, the desert waited. The bodies cooled. The clock on 7 days began its merciless countdown. Finally, Lark shrugged, or tried to, the chains limiting the gesture. "Well, Sheriff, I suppose dying in the desert with you is marginally more interesting than rotting in Yuma. You have yourself a criminal consultant." Ward nodded, then looked at his deputies. "Barnes, you're in charge until I return. Tommy, you ride with the lieutenant. Make sure the army understands what we're attempting." "Sheriff, this is crazy," Tommy protested. "You'll be carrying $1 million, or something that looks like it, through the most dangerous territory in the West, with a wanted outlaw and a foreign warrior for company. No backup, no support." "I'll have the best backup there is." Ward touched his badge. "I'll have the law." "The law doesn't mean much to men who murder diplomats." "Then it's time they learned different." The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ward rode to Fort Benson with Sato and the still shackled Lark, where he presented his plan to Colonel Morrison, a career officer with more experience than optimism. "You understand the Army cannot officially sanction this," Morrison said, alone with Ward in his office while Lark and Sato waited under guard outside. "If you fail, if I fail, you proceed with whatever military operation you're planning." Ward met the colonel's tired eyes. "But if I succeed, you avoid a war." "The diplomatic repercussions alone are above my pay grade, Colonel. I'm just a county sheriff trying to solve a crime." Morrison almost smiled. "A crime that could reshape the territory." "All crimes reshape something. This one's just bigger than most." In the end, Morrison agreed. He provided what he called a convincing approximation of $1 million, $200,000 in actual currency and gold, the rest in cut paper and weighted bars in a locked strongbox. Enough to pass casual inspection, not enough to be a genuine fortune if things went wrong. "The ransom note said instructions would follow," Morrison reminded Ward. "We've received nothing yet." "They're watching. Probably have been since the attack." Ward accepted the strongbox. heavy enough to require 2 hands. When they're ready, they'll make contact. He was proven right before sunset. A boy, couldn't have been more than 10, appeared at the fort's gate with a sealed envelope. He claimed a man in a dark coat had given him $1 to deliver it, then disappeared into the growing crowd of settlers and soldiers before anyone could question him further. The envelope contained a map and brief instructions. Sheriff Caleb Ward will serve as courier. He will depart at dawn, alone, following the marked route. Any deviation, any additional riders, any military pursuit will result in immediate termination of negotiations and execution of the asset. 20 miles north of Copper Springs, he will find further instructions. The courier has 5 days to reach the designated exchange point. 2 days have already passed. Ward studied the map in Morrison's office. The marked route led north through some of the harshest terrain in the territory. Desert badlands, narrow canyons, regions where water was scarce and dangers plentiful. It would take a skilled rider 3 hard days minimum. They've planned this carefully, Morrison observed. Cut the timeline, isolated the courier, chose terrain that prevents easy military shadowing. They've also made assumptions. Ward traced the route with 1 finger. They assume I'll follow orders. They assume I'll be alone. They assume fear will keep me compliant. And will it? Ward thought of his wife back home, of the life he'd built behind a badge, of 23 years spent believing the law mattered even when it was inconvenient. No, Colonel, it won't. That night, in the fort's stable, Ward made his final preparations. Sato had secured his own supplies and weapons, a long, curved sword Ward recognized as a katana, and other implements he didn't ask about. The warrior moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who'd prepared for impossible missions and survived. Lark presented a different challenge. I need him unchained, Ward told Morrison. Absolutely not. Colonel, if we're attacked, he needs to defend himself, and I need to maintain the illusion I'm traveling alone. Can't do that with him in prison irons. Morrison's expression suggested he'd rather arm a scorpion, but he eventually conceded. He tries to run. I'll shoot him myself, Ward finished. Trust me, we understand each other. When the blacksmith removed the chains, Lark rubbed his wrists and ankles, grinning. Freedom. Even temporary freedom. You have no idea how sweet this feels, Sheriff. Don't get comfortable. You're still my prisoner, just a mobile one. They gathered in the stable, an unlikely trinity. Ward, weathered and stubborn, with a badge that meant everything. Sato, quiet and coiled, with honor that demanded satisfaction. And Lark, silver-tongued and dangerous, with motivations no one fully trusted. We leave before dawn, Ward said. I'll ride the marked route as instructed. You two will parallel me, stay out of sight, but close enough to respond if needed. When we find traces of the kidnappers— If we find traces, Lark corrected. When Ward insisted, Sato tracks while I continue forward. We coordinate, we stay smart, and we remember that 13 men died for this pony. And $1 million, Lark added. The money's not real. They don't know that, which makes it very real indeed. Lark's eyes glinted in the lamplight. We're riding into the devil's country with a box of lies, Sheriff. You understand that makes us con men, yes? Not lawmen, con men. I understand we're doing what's necessary. Ah, necessity. The mother of all moral compromise. But Lark's grin held something besides mockery now, something almost like respect. You're more interesting than I gave you credit for, Ward. Sato spoke for the first time in hours. The sacred pony must be recovered alive. This is not negotiable. Nothing about this is negotiable, Ward agreed. We find the pony, we find the killers. We end this before war starts. And if we can't? Sato's question hung in the air like smoke. Ward checked his Colt, spinning the cylinder, confirming each round. When he looked up, his eyes were hard as desert stone. Then we die trying, because that's what men with principles do when the wilderness tries to break them. Principles. Lark savored the word like good whiskey. You know, Sheriff, I used to have those. Back when I was Professor Victor Lark, teaching literature to bored children of wealthy ranchers. Principles didn't pay well, didn't keep me warm at night, didn't fill the hollow places inside where better things used to live. What changed? Ward asked, despite himself. I realized the whole thing was theater, law, order, civilization, Just stories we tell ourselves to pretend the chaos isn't winning. Lark's grin faded. But you, Ward, you actually believe it. The badge, the law, the idea that justice means something. That's either profound wisdom or profound stupidity, and I genuinely can't tell which. Maybe both, Ward admitted. But it's what I've got. Sato nodded slowly. The samurai code teaches that the way of the warrior is death. Not seeking death, but accepting it. Living each moment as if already dead, so that when death comes, it finds you ready. He met Ward's eyes. You have this quality, Sheriff. You have already accepted what this mission may cost. I've accepted I don't have a choice, Ward corrected. Those men on the train didn't have a choice either. The sacred pony doesn't have a choice. So I'll be the one who chooses to do something about it. 3 men. 3 completely different reasons for riding into hell. But for the next 5 days, they'd ride together. Dawn came cold and clear, the desert morning still holding a memory of night's chill. Ward saddled his horse, a sturdy roan mare named Justice, because he'd always had a dark sense of humor about these things, and secured the strongbox to his saddle. 200,000 in real money, 800,000 in convincing lies, all of it heavy enough to make the horse adjust her stance. Sato and Lark had vanished before first light, ghosts on the landscape, ready to shadow his route from a distance. Colonel Morrison walked Ward to the fort's gate. This is against every protocol, every procedure, every bit of military wisdom I've learned in 30 years. Yes, sir. If you fail, I'll likely be court-martialed for allowing it. Yes, sir. And if you succeed, I'll probably still be court-martialed for the irregularity of it. Ward swung into the saddle. Then we'd better make it worth the court-martial, Colonel. Morrison handed him a canteen, leather-worn soft from use. Godspeed, Sheriff. And for what it's worth, I think you're either the bravest man I've met or the most foolish. Asked my wife the same question on our wedding day. She's still deciding. Ward tipped his hat and urged Justice forward through the gate into the vastness of the territory beyond. Behind him, Fort Benson grew smaller. Ahead, the marked route stretched north into Badlands, where the sun hammered down like divine punishment, and the stones themselves seemed to hold grudges. Ward rode alone, or appeared to. Somewhere in the landscape, Lark and Sato kept pace, invisible but present. The first day passed in heat and silence. The route took him through familiar country initially, land he'd patrolled, towns he'd brought prisoners through. But as the sun climbed and fell, the terrain grew stranger, harsher. The desert here had bones, old bones, bleached white, scattered among the rocks like accusations. He found the first marker 20 miles north of Copper Springs, exactly as the instructions promised. A cairn of stones with a red cloth tied to the top, fluttering in the hot wind. Beneath the cairn, another envelope. Ward dismounted, checked his surroundings, nothing but empty land in all directions, and retrieved the message. Well done, Sheriff. You follow instructions. This is encouraging. Continue north to Devil's Canyon. Enter from the southern approach. You will find water at Widow's Spring, but do not camp there. You are being watched. 3 days remain. Ward read it twice, then tucked it away. They were watching. Of course they were. Probably had been since he left the fort. The question was how many, from where, and with what orders. He remounted and continued north, but now his eyes scanned differently, looking not just at the trail ahead, but at the distant ridges, the shadowed outcrops, anywhere a lookout could perch unseen. The sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of amber and rust. Ward made camp in a dry wash, building a small fire more for comfort than warmth. He ate jerky and hardtack, drank sparingly from his canteen, and watched the stars emerge one by one like witnesses to his madness. A sound, the soft scrape of boot on stone. Ward's hand went to his Colt, but he didn't draw. Come out slow, or I shoot you in the dark. Lark emerged into the firelight, hands raised, grinning. Peace, Sheriff. Just wanted to compare notes. You're supposed to stay hidden. I am hidden, to everyone except you. Lark settled on a rock across the fire, close enough to talk, far enough that Ward could draw if needed. Interesting first day. Did you notice the rider on the western ridge around noon? Ward had. One man, observing, not engaging. Did you notice the second rider on the eastern ridge 2 hours later? Ward's jaw tightened. He hadn't. You're sure? Quite sure. They're coordinating, Sheriff. Multiple observation posts, overlapping coverage. These aren't simple bandits. This is organized surveillance. Lark's face was serious now, the perpetual grin absent. Which supports my earlier theory. This whole operation is too sophisticated for common criminals. Where's Sato? Scouting ahead. The man moves like smoke. I lost track of him around sunset. Lark pulled a piece of jerky from his coat. Mind? Ward nodded, and they ate in silence for a moment. Two men who should have been enemies sharing a fire in the middle of nowhere. Can I ask you something, Sheriff? Lark's voice was quieter now, reflective. Why do this? You could have handed it to the army, let them fail or succeed, gone home to your wife and your comfortable life. Why risk everything for a pony you've never seen? Ward stared into the fire, watching flames dance across the darkness. You remember what you said earlier? About law and order being just stories? Vividly. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is all just stories. But stories matter, Lark. They're what separate us from the chaos. A man gives his word. That matters. A badge means protection. That matters. A treaty promises peace. That matters. He met the outlaw's eyes. 13 men died believing in those stories. The least I can do is try to make their belief worth something. Lark studied him for a long moment. You're an anachronism, Ward. The world's changing. Men like you, who believe in absolute right and wrong, you're becoming extinct. Maybe. But until I am, I'll keep wearing this badge. A third voice joined them from the darkness. A worthy philosophy. Both men turned to find Sato approaching, silent as a hunting cat despite the loose stones. The warrior settled near the fire, producing a small leather pouch. I found tracks, he said, opening the pouch to reveal dried meat and rice. 5 miles ahead, canyon entrance. Multiple horses, recent. They knew your route before you did. How many? Ward asked. 6 riders, maybe 7. They passed through yesterday, moving supplies. Lark whistled low. So they're not just watching, they're preparing, setting up the actual exchange point ahead of time. Or a trap, Sato added calmly. The distinction may be meaningless. Ward absorbed this, his mind working through possibilities. If the kidnappers were already positioned ahead, it meant they'd planned every step. The route, the timing, the isolation, all of it designed to control the courier completely. Tomorrow we enter Devil's Canyon, he said. It's narrow, steep-walled, perfect ambush territory. I could scout it tonight, Sato offered. No. If they're watching this closely, you'd be spotted. We proceed as planned. I follow the route. You two shadow and gather intelligence. When we know enough, we improvise, Lark finished. My favorite part. They talked tactics until the fire burned low. 3 men from 3 completely different worlds trying to solve a puzzle that could explode into war. Eventually, Lark and Sato disappeared back into the darkness, leaving Ward alone with his thoughts and the stars. He didn't sleep much. Every sound brought his hand to his weapon, the skitter of a lizard, the distant yip of a coyote, the wind moving through stones. Men were watching. How many, he couldn't know. What they'd do if they discovered his deception, he didn't want to imagine. But dawn came anyway, indifferent to his fears, and Ward saddled justice and continued north. Devil's Canyon announced itself gradually, first as a dark line on the horizon, then as a vast tear in the earth, a wound in the landscape where eons of water had carved stone into fantastic shapes. The entrance yawned before him like a mouth, shadows pooling in its depths despite the morning sun. Ward paused at the threshold, every instinct screaming warning. This was the moment. If the kidnappers wanted to take him, this was where they'd do it. He touched the badge on his chest, a talisman against fear, and urged justice forward into shadow. The canyon walls rose like cliffs on either side, jagged stone that seemed to lean inward, reducing the sky to a ribbon of blue far above. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many feet, the air suddenly cool and still. Hoofbeats echoed strangely, multiplying Justice's steps into a phantom cavalry. Ward rode slowly, eyes scanning the walls. Perfect sniper positions everywhere. A single shooter could command the entire passage, turn it into a killing ground with ease. But nothing happened. He rode for an hour through increasingly narrow passages, winding deeper into the canyon's throat. Once he passed Widow's Spring, a trickle of water seeping from stone, feeding a small pool, and remembered the instruction not to camp there. He didn't stop, didn't even dismount to water his horse, though Justice clearly wanted to. The canyon opened suddenly into a wider chamber, almost like a natural amphitheater. Stone pillars rose from the floor, carved by wind and water into shapes that suggested frozen giants. And in the center, another cairn, another message. Ward dismounted carefully, weapon drawn, turning a slow circle before approaching the marker. This envelope was different, heavier, sealed with actual wax. Sheriff Ward, you have proven yourself reliable. This is noted and appreciated. Tomorrow at noon, you will proceed to the coordinates marked on the enclosed map. You will find a stone formation called Angel's Rest. You will place the strongbox at the base of the formation and withdraw 500 yards. 1 hour after you withdraw, you will receive instructions regarding the sacred pony's location. Any deviation from these instructions, any sign of additional forces, will result in the immediate death of the asset and the termination of all negotiations. You have performed admirably, Sheriff. Do not falter now when success is within reach. The map showed a location perhaps 10 miles northwest, rugged country, isolated, far from any settlement or military post. Ward stood in the amphitheater of stone, the message in his hand, and felt the weight of the trap closing. Tomorrow at noon, he'd be ordered to abandon the strongbox and withdraw. The kidnappers would verify its contents from a distance, likely with a spyglass. If the money appeared genuine, they'd provide the pony's location. Except the money wasn't genuine. And once they discovered that, all bets were off. He tucked the message away and remounted, continuing through the canyon as the sun climbed toward its zenith. The walls seemed to close tighter, the shadows deeper. Twice he thought he heard sounds, a stone falling, a whisper of boot leather. But each time he turned, found nothing. They were ghosts, these kidnappers, professionals who left no trace except the messages they wanted found. That evening, Ward made camp in a small box canyon off the main route, defensible, with only one entrance, where he could watch for approach. He built his fire small, ate quickly, and waited for his strange companions to appear. Lark arrived first, slipping into the firelight like a stage actor entering scene. "Well, Sheriff, we're officially in the deep water now. You saw the message? Read it over your shoulder while you were focused on the map. You really should pay more attention to your surroundings." Lark's grin was brief, dark. "They're hurting you. Every instruction, every marker, it's all designed to funnel you to exactly where they want you. I know. And you're going anyway. I don't have a choice." Sato materialized from darkness, his arrival so silent Ward didn't notice until the warrior spoke. "I found their camp, 2 miles from Angel's Rest, hidden in a rock formation. 7 men, well-armed, professional." "Did you see the pony?" Ward asked. Sato shook his head. "No sign of it. Either they've hidden it elsewhere or it's already dead," Lark finished. "And this whole thing is just a setup to get the money." Ward had considered that possibility, but hearing it spoken aloud made it more real. If the pony's dead, the ransom makes no sense. They'd have no leverage. "Unless the ransom was never the point," Lark said quietly. "Think about it, Sheriff. They kill the pony, collect the money, and disappear. The army blames the Apache for interfering. War starts. Chaos erupts. And in that chaos, someone profits," Sato finished, his voice cold. "Land speculation, railroad contracts, military supply deals. War is very profitable for the right people." The 3 men stared at each other across the small fire, the implications settling like ash. "We're not just chasing kidnappers," Ward said slowly. "We're chasing someone who wants war." "Which makes them far more dangerous than simple criminals," Lark agreed. "Because they have resources, connections, maybe even official backing. Then we're probably riding to our deaths tomorrow," Sato observed with the same calm he might use to comment on the weather. Ward checked his Colt again. A nervous habit, meaningless but comforting. "Maybe. But we're riding anyway." "Why?" Lark's question wasn't mocking now, genuinely curious. "The odds are terrible. The enemy is unknown. The reward is negligible. Why not turn back, report what we've learned, let the army handle it?" Ward thought about his answer while the fire crackled and the night pressed close. "Because 13 men are dead," he said finally. "And if I turn back now, their deaths meant nothing. The badge I wear meant nothing. The law I swore to uphold meant nothing." He met each man's eyes in turn. "I'd rather die trying to make it mean something than live knowing I walked away." Silence. Then Sato bowed his head slightly. Honor recognizes honor, even across cultures. "I will stand with you tomorrow, Sheriff Ward." Lark sighed, a sound of theatrical resignation. "Well, I suppose if we're all choosing noble death over pragmatic survival, I might as well join the party. Besides," his grin returned, sharp and reckless, "I've always wondered what it feels like to be a hero. Might as well find out before they hang me." They spent the next hours planning. Such as planning was possible when walking into an obvious trap. Sato would position himself on the high ground overlooking Angel's Rest, ready to provide cover if shooting started. Lark would shadow Ward more closely, close enough to intervene, but hidden enough to maintain the illusion of a solo courier. When the exchange went wrong, and they all agreed it would go wrong, they'd have seconds to react before overwhelming force crushed them. "We need to verify the pony's alive," Ward said. "That's non-negotiable. I won't hand over anything until I see proof." "They'll refuse," Lark predicted. "Standard hostage negotiation. They hold all the cards." "Then we change the game." Ward's mind was working now, finding angles, seeing possibilities. "I bring the strongbox to Angel's Rest as ordered, but I don't leave it. I wait there, visible, alone. Force them to approach." "They'll shoot you," Sato said bluntly. "Maybe. Or maybe curiosity will win. They've gone to enormous effort to set this up. They'll want to know why I'm not following the script." Lark was nodding slowly. "Risky. Very risky. But it does hand you initiative. Make them react instead of executing their plan." His eyes narrowed. "You know they'll probably just kill you and take the strongbox anyway." "Probably," Ward agreed. "But at least I'll die knowing I tried something other than meek compliance." They talked until the fire died and the stars wheeled overhead, three unlikely allies bound together by circumstance and stubborn refusal to accept inevitable defeat. Eventually, Lark and Sato vanished back into darkness, leaving Ward alone with his thoughts one final time. Tomorrow, at noon, Angel's Rest. The end of the road, one way or another. Ward lay back against his saddle, staring at stars that had watched the desert long before men came with their laws and badges and foolish beliefs in justice. Those stars would keep watching long after he was gone, after this territory became something else, after the frontier closed and the wild places were tamed. But tonight, under this sky, he was still Sheriff Caleb Ward, and tomorrow he'd prove that meant something, even if proving it killed him. Dawn arrived with the color of old blood, staining the canyon walls in shades that made Ward think of the diplomatic train and the bodies scattered in the sand. He'd slept maybe 2 hours, fitful dreams interrupted by the sound of his own breathing and the persistent feeling of being watched. When he finally gave up and opened his eyes, the stars were already fading and the darkness had begun its retreat. Justice nickered softly as he approached, her breath steaming in the cool morning air. Ward stroked her neck, checking her hooves, her legs, making sure she was ready for whatever today would bring. The mare had carried him through 5 years of frontier law enforcement without complaint. If things went wrong at Angel's Rest, she'd need to carry him out faster than she'd ever run. He fed her grain from his saddlebag, then turned his attention to the strongbox. 200,000 in real currency and gold, 800,000 in carefully weighted deception. Ward opened it one final time, studying the arrangement. The real money sat on top, visible if someone lifted the lid. Beneath it, wrapped bundles that looked authentic enough to pass casual inspection. Only a thorough examination would reveal the truth. And by the time anyone examined it thoroughly, Ward planned to be long gone. Or dead. The odds between those two outcomes felt uncomfortably close. He was cinching the strongbox back to his saddle when a voice emerged from the rocks above. "You're up early for a man riding to his probable death." Lark descended from a ledge Ward hadn't even known was occupied, moving with the easy grace of someone who'd spent years staying one step ahead of the law. The outlaw looked worse for wear after a night in the open, dust in his silver-streaked hair, dark circles under his eyes, but his grin remained intact. "Couldn't sleep," Ward admitted. Neither could I. Kept thinking about all the ways today could go catastrophically wrong. Lark jumped the last few feet, landing softly. I counted 17 distinct scenarios. Would you like to hear them? No? Wise. Most of them end with us dead anyway. The outlaw produced a piece of hardtack from somewhere in his coat and bit into it, chewing thoughtfully. I've been considering your plan, staying at Angel's Rest instead of withdrawing, forcing them to approach. And it's either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. Lark's eyes, winter pale in the dawn light, studied Ward with something that might have been respect. You understand they're professionals, yes? Whoever organized this operation has resources, training, discipline. They won't be impressed by a stubborn sheriff with a badge. I'm not trying to impress them. I'm trying to see the pony. Why? What difference does it make if you see it before they kill you? Ward checked his Colt for the third time that morning, the ritual comforting even though he knew the weapon was loaded. Because if the pony's alive, there's still a chance this ends without war. And if it's dead, then I need to know before I hand over anything. Noble, useless, but noble. Lark finished his hardtack and dusted his hands. For what it's worth, Sheriff, I hope you're right. I hope the animal is alive and this whole mess can be resolved with minimal bloodshed. But in my experience, the frontier doesn't reward optimism. Your experience involves robbing stages and cheating at cards. Exactly. I'm an expert in human nature at its worst. And human nature says when men go to this much trouble, they don't leave loose ends. Lark's grin faded. We're loose ends, Ward. All three of us. Before Ward could respond, Sato appeared from the opposite direction, materializing from shadow like smoke taking shape. The warrior carried a small cloth bundle, which he unwrapped to reveal strips of dried meat and rice balls. Eat, Sato said, offering the food. Battle requires strength. Is that what this is? Ward accepted the rice, surprised by how hungry he was. A battle? All confrontations are battles. Some use swords, some use words, some use deception. Sato's dark eyes were calm, almost serene. The weapon changes. The principle remains. They ate together as the sun climbed higher, three men sharing a simple meal before walking into whatever hell waited at Angel's Rest. Ward noticed details he'd missed in firelight, the precise way Sato moved, every gesture economical and purposeful. The restless intelligence in Lark's eyes, constantly evaluating, calculating odds. These were dangerous men, both of them, men who'd survived by being smarter, faster, more ruthless than their enemies. And for the next few hours, they were his only allies. The camp I found last night, Sato said between bites. 7 men, as I reported. But this morning I scouted closer. I saw weapons, not just rifles and pistols. They have dynamite, blasting caps, enough to destroy a canyon if needed. Ward absorbed this information like a punch to the gut. They're planning to erase evidence, or ensure no witnesses, Lark added. Angel's Rest sits in a natural bowl formation, yes? Stone walls on 3 sides. If they wanted to trap someone there and eliminate all trace— Stop, Ward interrupted. I understand the implications. Do you? Lark leaned forward, voice dropping. Because I'm not certain you do, Sheriff. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's not even a trap. It's an execution dressed up as a transaction. They're going to take the money, kill you, and blow the whole site to rubble. No pony, no proof, no loose ends. Then why the elaborate setup? Why the messages, the instructions, the careful timing? Sato answered, his voice quiet. Theater. The appearance of legitimate exchange. When the army investigates and finds only destruction, the evidence will suggest the courier failed. Perhaps tried to steal the money. Perhaps encountered hostile forces. The truth will be buried with your body. The 3 men sat in silence, the weight of their shared understanding pressing down like the heat that would soon bake the canyon floor. Ward had known this was dangerous, had accepted the possibility of death, but hearing it laid out so clearly, so inevitably, made his throat tight. I'm still going, he said finally. Of course you are. Lark's tone held no mockery now. Because you're Sheriff Caleb Ward, and backing down would violate every principle you've built your life around. I understand. I think it's insane, but I understand. I will provide cover from the high ground, Sato said. If shooting begins, I can eliminate perhaps 3 of them before they locate my position. That gives you seconds to find shelter. And I'll shadow close, Lark added, close enough to intervene if the situation allows. Though I should mention my intervention will likely consist of getting shot alongside you while achieving nothing. Ward almost smiled. Your optimism is inspiring. I'm a realist, Sheriff. It's kept me alive this long. Lark stood, brushing dust from his coat. But I suppose if we're going to die today, we might as well die doing something memorable. The frontier has enough forgotten graves. Let's make sure ours at least have a story. They broke camp with the efficiency of men who'd done this before, erasing signs of their presence, scattering the fire's ashes. Within 20 minutes, no evidence remained that they'd been there at all. Ward mounted Justice, feeling the familiar creak of leather, the solid weight of the horse beneath him. The strongbox hung heavy on his saddle, a burden of lies and desperation. He touched his badge one final time, the metal already warm from the rising sun. Angel's Rest is 10 miles northwest, he said. I'll approach from the south as instructed, arrive by noon. If I'm not back by sunset, we retrieve your body and inform the army, Lark finished. Yes, very morbid and practical. Can we skip the part where you give us heartfelt final words and just get on with it? But Ward saw through the sarcasm to the tension beneath. Lark was scared. So was Sato, though the warrior hid it better. So was Ward himself, his heart beating too fast, his hands slightly unsteady as he gathered the reins. Just stay alive, Ward said. Both of you. That's all I'm asking. Sato bowed slightly. Honor demands no less. Lark's grin returned sharp and reckless. Well then, Sheriff, try not to get shot in the first 5 minutes. I'd hate to think we wasted all this dramatic preparation for nothing. Ward urged Justice forward, leaving his unlikely companions behind as he navigated through the canyon's twisting passages. The walls seemed to close in tighter now, the shadows deeper despite the climbing sun. Every sound echoed strangely, hoofbeats multiplying into phantom armies, the creak of leather becoming whispers of warning. He'd ridden these badlands before, back when he was younger, and the frontier felt more like adventure than grinding survival. The territory had seemed romantic then, full of possibility and wild beauty. Now it just felt dangerous, every rock hiding potential ambush, every turn concealing threats. The canyon opened gradually, the walls lowering until Ward emerged onto a high plateau. Before him stretched miles of broken country, arroyos and mesas, stands of twisted juniper, stone formations carved by wind into fantastic shapes. And in the distance, perhaps 3 miles away, he could see it. Angel's Rest. The formation rose from the plateau like a monument to some forgotten giant, a cluster of balanced rocks that defied gravity and sense. The largest stone sat atop 3 smaller ones, creating a natural arch that did indeed resemble spread wings, if you squinted and had enough imagination. Indigenous peoples had considered it sacred, Ward knew. A place where the earth touched sky. Now it would be the site of either salvation or slaughter. He checked his pocket watch. 9:30, 2.5 hours until noon, time enough to reach the formation, scout the approaches, prepare whatever defense was possible. Time enough to regret every decision that had led him here. Justice picked her way across the plateau, sure-footed despite the loose stone and hidden crevices. Ward's eyes scanned constantly, looking for the watchers he knew were there. The kidnappers wouldn't leave the exchange site unmonitored. They'd have men positioned, observing, ready to react if he deviated from instructions. Twice he caught glimpses of movement on distant ridges, riders paralleling his course, staying just visible enough to send a message. We see you. We're ready. Follow the plan or die. Ward followed the plan. The approach to Angel's Rest took him through a narrow defile between 2 rock formations, a natural choke point where a single shooter could command the entire passage. Ward's hand drifted to his Colt, expecting ambush, but nothing happened. He emerged into the bowl-shaped depression Sato had described, and there it stood. Angel's Rest dominated the space, impossibly balanced stones rising 30 feet into the air. The arch formed by the upper rock created a shadow beneath, a pool of darkness even at midday. Around the formation, the ground was surprisingly flat, almost like an arena prepared for spectacle. Ward dismounted slowly, every movement careful, his eyes never still. No sign of the kidnappers, no sign of the pony. Just wind-carved stone and morning silence and the weight of being watched by unseen eyes. He led Justice to the base of the formation and tied her reins loosely. If shooting started, he wanted her able to bolt free. Then he unfastened the strongbox and carried it to the exact center of the shadowed space beneath the arch. The box hit the ground with a dull thud. Ward straightened, hands away from his weapons, and waited. Minutes crawled past like wounded things. The sun climbed higher, shrinking the shadows, turning the bowl into an oven. Sweat trickled down Ward's spine, soaked his shirt, stung his eyes. He didn't move, didn't seek shade, just stood beside the strongbox, visible and vulnerable, refusing to withdraw as instructed. Somewhere above, hidden in rocks Ward couldn't see, Sato would be positioning himself. Finding the perfect vantage point, his strange weapons ready, his warrior's patience infinite. Somewhere closer, also hidden, Lark would be cursing Ward's stubborn stupidity while preparing to do something equally stupid if violence erupted. And somewhere else, how far, Ward couldn't know, 7 armed men would be watching, realizing their courier had gone off script, trying to decide how to respond. The pocket watch in Ward's vest showed 11:15 when he finally heard the sound of approaching horses. They came from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated maneuver designed to surround and intimidate. Ward turned slowly, tracking each rider, counting. 6 men, all armed with rifles, all dressed in dark clothing that suggested profession rather than frontier casualness. The 7th man, the leader, presumably, rode in last, approaching from the north. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with a face weathered by sun and hard decisions. He wore a suit despite the heat, expensive fabric now dust-covered but still projecting authority. When he dismounted, his movements were stiff, like someone more accustomed to boardrooms than saddles. "Sheriff Ward," the man said, his voice carrying Eastern education and Western pragmatism. "You were instructed to withdraw after delivering the strongbox." "I changed my mind," Ward replied. "Figured we should talk face to face. That wasn't part of the arrangement. Neither was murdering 13 men on a diplomatic train." Ward kept his hands visible, away from his weapon, but his voice carried iron. "So, forgive me if I don't feel bound by your arrangements." The older man studied him for a long moment, then gestured to his riders. They dismounted but kept their rifles ready, forming a loose perimeter. Professional, disciplined. Exactly as Sato had described. "My name is Harold Whitaker," the man said. "I'm a businessman. This is purely a business transaction, Sheriff. Nothing personal." 13 dead men might disagree. Necessary casualties. Regrettable, but necessary. Whitaker approached the strongbox, staying just out of Ward's reach. The sacred pony represented an obstacle to progress. The peace treaty it symbolized would have frozen development of this entire region. My associates and I have invested considerable capital in expansion plans. We couldn't allow sentiment to derail economic reality. Ward felt pieces clicking into place, the conspiracy revealing itself. The railroad. Among other ventures, land speculation, mining rights, government contracts. Whitaker's smile was cold as January frost. War is profitable, Sheriff, especially wars that result in the removal of inconvenient indigenous populations from valuable territory. So you orchestrated the train attack, stole the pony, demanded ransom you never intended to honor. The ransom was necessary theater. It had to appear legitimate, at least initially. Whitaker gestured toward the strongbox. Which brings us to this moment. $1 million in exchange for information about the sacred pony's location. A fair trade, all things considered. Except the pony's already dead, isn't it? Ward watched Whitaker's eyes, looking for tells. You killed it days ago. This whole exchange is just misdirection while you prepare for war. Something flickered across Whitaker's face. Surprise, maybe, or reassessment. You're more perceptive than expected. Yes, the animal is dead. Regrettable, but necessary. Its death will be blamed on Apache interference, providing justification for military action. He nodded toward the strongbox. Open it, please. Let's conclude our business. No, Ward said simply. The rifles around him shifted, 6 men tensing. No? Whitaker's voice hardened. Sheriff, you're surrounded by professional soldiers. Former cavalry, actually, now in private employ. You have no leverage, no support, no options. Open the strongbox or we'll kill you, and open it ourselves. Then you'll have to kill me, Ward said, because I'm not cooperating with a conspiracy to start a war. How noble, and how pointless. Whitaker sighed, genuinely regretful. I actually respect you, Sheriff Ward. You're a man of principle in a world that's outgrown principles. But your kind is obsolete. The frontier is closing. Progress demands efficiency, not sentiment. Ward's mind raced, calculating. 6 rifles pointed at him. Maybe 3 seconds before they fired. Sato could drop 2, maybe 3 if he was fast and lucky. Lark might create a distraction, but even in the best scenario, Ward would likely die here in the shadow of Angel's Rest, unless he changed the game entirely. The strongbox is rigged, Ward said. Whitaker paused. Explain. Dynamite. Blasting cap. Pressure trigger. The lie came smoothly, mixing with truth in proportions Ward hoped would sell. You open it wrong, we all die. Insurance against exactly this situation. It was a gamble, a desperate bluff built on Sato's observation about the kidnapper's own dynamite stores. Ward watched Whitaker's face, looking for any sign the man believed him. One of the riders, a hard-faced man with sergeant's bearing, spoke up. He's lying, Mr. Whitaker. Classic desperation move. Perhaps, Whitaker agreed, or perhaps the sheriff is exactly as clever as his reputation suggests. He studied the strongbox, then Ward, weighing risks. You're carrying $1 million in what you claim is a bomb. That seems counterproductive. It's carrying $200,000 in real money, Ward said, committing fully to the bluff now. The rest is weighted paper, because I knew this was a setup. Knew you'd never honor the exchange. So I brought enough to look convincing and enough explosives to ensure you'd die trying to steal it. The silence that followed was profound. Ward could hear his own heartbeat, the whisper of wind across stone, Justice's nervous shifting 20 feet away. Whitaker's expression had gone cold, all pretense of civility vanishing. You knowingly walked into a trap with insufficient ransom and a strongbox full of dynamite. That's either breathtaking courage or breathtaking stupidity. Bit of both, Ward admitted. But here's what happens next. You let me ride out of here. In exchange, I'll tell you how to safely open the box and collect the $200,000 that's actually in there. You take a loss, but you don't die. Seems fair. Or we shoot you, examine the strongbox carefully, and discover you're lying. Maybe. But are you willing to bet your life on it? Ward gestured toward the box. You saw what dynamite did to the train. Imagine what it'll do in this confined space with stone walls reflecting the blast. Nobody walks away. The hard-faced sergeant raised his rifle. This is horseshit, Mr. Whitaker. Let me put a bullet in him and we'll see if... The shot came from nowhere and everywhere, a crack that echoed off the surrounding rocks. The sergeant's hat flew off his head, a perfect hole drilled through the crown. Everyone froze. Ward didn't move, but his heart surged with fierce gratitude. Sato. The warrior had just announced his presence with the most eloquent argument possible. I have a sniper, Ward said calmly, positioned somewhere in these rocks. He just demonstrated his accuracy. Right now, his sights are on you, Mr. Whitaker. If your men shoot me, you die next. If they try to locate him, he'll drop 3 of you before they find his position. And I should mention, he's also carrying dynamite. This last part was pure invention, but Ward sold it with absolute confidence. Let them imagine explosives raining down from hidden positions, turning Angel's Rest into a killing ground. Whitaker's face had gone pale. His riders shifted nervously, rifles now pointing in multiple directions, searching for a target they couldn't see. You're bluffing, Whitaker said, but his voice held doubt. Am I? Want to test that theory? Ward took a single step forward. Here's my final offer. You and your men mount up and ride away. Leave the territory, abandon whatever conspiracy you've engineered, disappear. In exchange, I won't hunt you down for murder and treason. That's not an offer. That's a fantasy. It's the only offer you're getting. Ward's hand drifted closer to his Colt. Because in about 30 seconds, my sniper is going to start eliminating your men one by one. And while he's doing that, I'm going to kill you, Mr. Whitaker. Not because I want to, because you forced this situation. The standoff held for 5 eternal heartbeats. Ward could see Whitaker calculating odds, weighing options, recognizing that the simple transaction he'd planned had become something far more dangerous. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Well, 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 looks like we've got ourselves a proper Mexican standoff. Lark appeared from behind a rock formation to the east, casual as Sunday morning, holding a rifle he must have acquired from somewhere. The outlaw's grin was pure reckless delight as he sauntered into the open. Nobody move or the crazy sniper in the rock starts painting everything red, Lark announced cheerfully. Also, I should mention I'm a convicted criminal with nothing to lose and terrible impulse control, so if this goes sideways, I'm taking at least 2 of you gentlemen with me. One of Whitaker's men swung his rifle toward Lark, but the outlaw was faster, his weapon snapping up to center on the man's chest. Remember what the sheriff said about the sniper? He's watching. You shoot me, he shoots you. Basic geometry. Ward wanted to strangle Lark for revealing himself, wanted to thank him for the support, wanted to scream at the insanity of the entire situation. Instead, he focused on Whitaker. Your move, Ward said quietly. But choose fast. My trigger finger's getting tired. Whitaker stared at him, at Lark, at the rocks where Sato remained invisible. Ward could see the businessman's mind working, calculating costs versus benefits, weighing his own mortality against his greed. Finally, Whitaker raised his hand, signaling his men to lower their weapons. This isn't over, Sheriff. Yes, it is. Ward's voice carried absolute finality. You've lost. The conspiracy's exposed, the plans failed, and if you're smart, you'll disappear before the army learns what you've done. The army won't believe you. I have connections, resources, lawyers. You have a dead sacred pony and 13 murdered men, Ward interrupted. I have witnesses, evidence, and testimony from you about railroad conspiracies and manufactured wars. Take your pick. Which story sounds more credible? Whitaker's jaw worked, fury and frustration warring in his eyes. But beneath it all, Ward saw recognition. The businessman knew he'd been outmaneuvered, his careful conspiracy unraveling in the shadow of Angel's Rest. Mount up, Whitaker ordered his men. We're leaving. The strongbox, one rider protested. Leave it. Whitaker's voice was bitter. Let the good sheriff have his symbolic victory. They mounted in tense silence, 6 professional soldiers and 1 defeated businessman. Ward kept his hand on his Colt, watching every movement, ready for treachery. But Whitaker's acceptance seemed genuine, the acceptance of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. As they turned to ride away, Whitaker looked back one final time. You think you've won, Sheriff, but the frontier is changing whether you accept it or not. Men like me represent the future. Men like you are dinosaurs, fighting extinction. Maybe, Ward allowed, but this dinosaur just stopped a war. What did your future accomplish today? Whitaker had no answer. He spurred his horse and led his men away across the plateau, 6 riders disappearing into the Badlands like smoke dispersing. Ward watched until they were gone, until the last sound of hoofbeats faded, until nothing remained but silence and the wind moving through Angel's Rest. Only then did he let himself breathe, let the tension drain from muscles that had been coiled for violence. Lark lowered his rifle and walked over, shaking his head. Sheriff, that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. I genuinely cannot decide which. The strongbox doesn't actually have dynamite in it, Ward admitted. I assumed as much. Your bluff was magnificent, though. Very convincing. Lark's grin widened. For a moment, even I wondered if you'd rigged it. Sato appeared from the rocks above, descending with the same impossible silence he'd demonstrated before. The warrior carried a rifle Ward didn't recognize, probably taken from one of the observation posts he'd scouted. Well shot, Ward said. That hat trick bought us everything. I aimed for his head, Sato replied calmly. I missed. Lark burst out laughing, the sound echoing off stone. Oh, that's perfect, absolutely perfect. The shot that saved us all was actually a miss. But Ward wasn't laughing. He walked to the strongbox, knelt beside it, and opened the lid. The real money stared back at him, 200,000 in currency and gold. Evidence of the government's desperation, now evidence of a conspiracy stopped. The pony, he said quietly. Whitaker admitted it's dead. The laughter died. Sato approached, his face grave. Then the mission has failed. The sacred animal cannot be recovered. Which means war, Lark added. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The peace treaty is broken, trust is destroyed, and someone will demand blood payment. Ward stared at the money, thinking about 13 dead men, about a white pony killed for politics, about Harold Whitaker riding away unpunished. They'd stopped the immediate conspiracy, yes, prevented Whitaker from profiting directly, but the damage was done. Unless. The pony's body, Ward said suddenly. Where would they have hidden it? Sato considered. Whitaker's camp, the one I scouted. They would need to produce remains eventually, make the death appear to be Apache violence. Then we find it. Ward stood, decision made. We recover the body. We document how it actually died. We build evidence that proves this was conspiracy, not indigenous violence. That won't bring it back, Lark pointed out. No, but it might prevent war, might give the diplomats something to work with, proof that the treaty was violated by criminals, not by either side. Ward was already moving toward justice, his mind racing. It's not perfect. It's probably not even good. But it's what we've got. They loaded the strongbox back onto Ward's saddle, securing it with rope. The money would be returned to the army, testimony to both the conspiracy and its failure. Then they mounted. Ward on justice, Lark on a horse he'd apparently acquired during his shadowing, Sato on his own mount, and rode north toward the camp Sato had discovered. The sun had begun its afternoon descent, painting the Badlands in shades of gold and copper. The heat remained oppressive, the landscape hostile, but Ward felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. Maybe just a sliver of it, fragile as desert morning, but real nonetheless. They rode hard, covering ground quickly, three unlikely companions united by stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The camp appeared in the distance, a cluster of tents and supplies nestled against a rock formation that provided shade and concealment. Abandoned now. Whitaker's men had fled, leaving behind equipment, food, and Ward prayed evidence. They searched methodically, Sato taking the perimeter, Lark examining the tents, Ward checking supply caches. Most of it was standard frontier gear, bedrolls, cooking equipment, ammunition. But in the largest tent, Ward found what they'd come for. Papers, ledgers, correspondence. He spread them across a camp table, reading quickly. Letters between Whitaker and railroad executives, discussing land acquisition strategies. Financial records showing payments to security contractors. The polite term for hired guns. Maps marking indigenous territory with proposed rail routes. And buried beneath it all, a telegram dated 3 days before the train attack. Sacred pony arrival. Confirmed stop, execute plan as discussed. Stop. Ensure no witnesses. Stop. Ward photographed it mentally. Every word, every detail. This was it. Proof of premeditation, proof of conspiracy, proof that the attack had been calculated murder rather than spontaneous violence. Sheriff? Sato's voice carried urgency. Ward rushed outside to find the warrior standing before a shallow excavation behind the camp. And there, barely covered by loose dirt and rock, lay the sacred pony. Even in death, the animal possessed a strange beauty. Its coat, once pure white, was matted with dust and blood. Someone had shot it, professionally, mercifully, if such a word applied, with a single bullet behind the ear. Quick death, at least. Small comfort for a creature that had represented so much hope. Ward knelt beside the body, anger burning cold in his chest. This animal had been a gift, a symbol, a bridge between cultures, and men like Whitaker had killed it for profit margins and expansion plans. Can we transport it? He asked Sato. The warrior nodded. If we construct a travois, yes. It will slow us, but yes. Then we do it. We bring the body back along with all this evidence. We give the army and the diplomats everything they need to understand what really happened. They work quickly, building a makeshift sled from tent poles and canvas, securing the sacred pony's body with ropes. It was grim work, sad work, but necessary. Lark gathered the papers into saddlebags, organizing them with surprising efficiency. You know, the outlaw said as they prepared to depart, when this is over, I'm still going to prison. Probably for a very long time. Probably, Ward agreed. And you're still a stubborn, idealistic fool who believes in badges and laws and other obsolete concepts. Definitely, Lark grinned. Just wanted to make sure we were clear on that. Wouldn't want you thinking we'd become friends or anything sentimental. Wouldn't dream of it. But when Lark extended his hand, Ward shook it. Firm grip, steady eye contact, acknowledgement passing between two men who'd faced death together and survived. Sato approached, leading his horse, the travois trailing behind with its sad cargo. We should move. Whitaker may reconsider his retreat. They rode south as afternoon stretched toward evening. 3 men, 3 horses, and 1 dead symbol of peace. The Badlands seemed to watch them pass, stone sentinels bearing witness to their strange procession. Ward kept expecting ambush, kept watching the ridges for Whitaker's men returning for revenge. But the landscape remained empty, hostile in its indifference, but not actively murderous. As the sun touched the western horizon, they stopped to rest and water the horses. Ward pulled out the telegram he'd pocketed from Whitaker's camp, reading it again by fading light. This proves conspiracy, he said, but it doesn't prove who sent it. The sender's code is printed at the bottom, Lark observed, looking over his shoulder. 3 letters, initials probably. H.W. Harold Whitaker himself. Sending himself confirmation? Ward frowned. That makes no sense. Sato examined the telegram, his eyes narrowing. Not Whitaker. Look at the routing codes. This originated from Denver. Whitaker was here in the territory when it was sent. The implications settled like lead. Whitaker wasn't the architect of the conspiracy. He was just the foreman, implementing someone else's plan. Someone with resources and reach extending beyond the frontier. Someone still out there. Ward folded the telegram carefully, tucking it away. They'd stopped this particular scheme, recovered what evidence they could, prevented immediate war. But the larger conspiracy, the shadowy figures pulling strings from comfortable offices far away, those remained untouched. Fighting the frontier, Ward had learned long ago, meant accepting incomplete victories. You saved what you could, stopped what you could stop, and accepted that evil was too vast to defeat entirely. But you kept fighting anyway. They made camp in a sheltered wash as darkness fell complete. No fire tonight, too risky with Whitaker's possible return. They ate cold food and drank sparingly, taking turns on watch, 3 men guarding 1 dead pony and evidence that might prevent a war. Ward took the first watch, sitting with his back against stone, Colt across his lap, eyes on the stars. Somewhere out there, Whitaker was riding toward whatever fate awaited failed conspirators. Somewhere farther, in Denver or Washington or New York, the real architects of this scheme were already planning their next move. And somewhere closer than he'd like to think, the frontier waited to test him again, because it always did. The wilderness never ran out of challenges, never stopped pushing against the fragile edges of law and civilization. But tonight, Sheriff Caleb Ward had pushed back, and the wilderness had blinked first. The second watch belonged to Lark, and Ward surrendered it reluctantly, his body exhausted but his mind still churning through possibilities and dangers. He'd barely closed his eyes when the outlaw's hand clamped over his mouth, jerking him instantly awake. "Riders," Lark whispered, breath hot against Ward's ear. "Coming from the east, maybe a mile out." Ward's hand found his Colt before his eyes fully opened. He rolled silently to a crouch, scanning the darkness beyond their sheltered wash. The night was moonless, stars providing barely enough light to distinguish shapes from shadows. But there, movement against the darker outline of distant rocks. Horses, at least 3, maybe more. Sato materialized beside them, already armed, his face invisible in the darkness, but his presence steady. Not Whitaker's men. Different approach pattern. "How can you tell?" Ward asked. "Whitaker's riders move like cavalry. Disciplined formations, predictable routes." Sato's voice was barely audible. "These riders move like hunters, cautious, spreading wide to surround before closing." Ward's gut tightened. Apache, maybe. Or worse, opportunistic bandits who'd spotted their camp and saw easy prey. 3 men, horses, supplies, and a strongbox that probably looked valuable even from a distance. "We could run," Lark suggested quietly. "Load fast, move south, use darkness for cover." "With the travois?" Ward shook his head. "We'd be too slow, too loud. They'd run us down in minutes." "Then we fight. Against unknown numbers in the dark? That's suicide." So what do you suggest, Sheriff? Stay here and hope they're friendly? Before Ward could answer, a voice called out from the darkness, speaking in heavily accented English. You camp with death. This is bad medicine. Ward tensed, finger on the trigger, searching for the source. The voice came from somewhere north, maybe 50 yards distant, close enough to have killed them already if killing was the intent. We mean no harm, Ward called back. Just passing through on official business. Silence. Then the sound of approaching hooves, deliberate and unhurried. 3 riders emerged from darkness into the faint starlight, and Ward's breath caught. Apache warriors, all 3. They sat their horses with the easy confidence of men who'd been born in the saddle, who knew this territory better than their own heartbeats. The lead rider was older, face deeply lined, wearing traditional clothing mixed with practical frontier gear. He carried a rifle but held it casually, pointed at the ground rather than at Ward's camp. I am Running Wolf, the man said, his English better than his accent suggested. We have followed you since Angel's Rest, watched you face the white men who killed the sacred animal. Ward's hand stayed on his Colt, but he didn't draw. You saw the confrontation? We see many things. The desert speaks to those who listen. Running Wolf's eyes moved to the travois, to the white shape beneath the canvas. You carry the sacred pony home. This is honorable. It's dead, Ward said bluntly, killed by men who wanted war between your people and the army, men who wanted your land for railroads and profit. We know of these men, know their greed, their lies. Running Wolf dismounted slowly, his companions remaining on their horses, watchful but not threatening. The one who gave the sacred pony, the man from across the ocean, he treated my chief with respect, spoke of peace, of understanding between peoples. When we heard it was stolen, many among our tribe wanted blood payment. And now? Ward asked carefully. Now we have questions. Running Wolf approached the travois, his weathered face grave. He pulled back the canvas, studying the sacred pony's body in starlight. When he looked up, his eyes held something between sorrow and anger. This animal died from a bullet, clean shot, no struggle. Professional killing. Harold Whitaker's men, Ward confirmed. They murdered it to create an excuse for war. We have evidence, documents, telegrams, proof of the conspiracy. Running Wolf was silent for a long moment, one hand resting on the sacred pony's still neck. Many times, white men promise peace while preparing for war. We have learned to trust actions, not words. But you, Sheriff, you carry death back to those who can speak truth about it. This is unusual. I'm trying to prevent a war nobody wants except the men who'd profit from it. The Army wants war. Many in the Army have wanted our removal for years. Some do, Ward admitted, but not all. Colonel Morrison at Fort Benson, he's a fair man. If I can bring him proof of what really happened, proof that your people weren't involved in the attack, he'll listen. Running Wolf studied Ward's face with the intensity of someone reading a difficult text. You believe your proof will matter? That paper and words will stop what has already been set in motion? I believe I have to try. The Apache warrior's expression softened slightly, something like respect crossing his features. My grandfather told me there are 2 kinds of white men on the frontier, those who see land and resources, and those who see people and principles. The first kind is dangerous, the second kind is rare. He glanced at Lark and Sato. You travel with strange companions, a criminal and a foreign warrior. Desperate times make strange alliances, Lark offered with his characteristic grin. Though I resent being called a criminal, I prefer entrepreneur with flexible ethics. Running Wolf almost smiled. The one who speaks with silver tongue. We have heard of you, Victor Lark. You once helped a Chiricahua woman escape from men who would have sold her to a brothel. Lark's grin faded, something genuine flickering in his eyes. That was years ago, surprised anyone remembers. We remember those who show kindness when they could show cruelty. Running Wolf turned to Sato. And you, warrior from the distant lands, you serve the one who gave the sacred pony? Sato bowed his head respectfully. I serve honor. The dignitary I represent believed in peace. I fight to preserve what he attempted to build. Running Wolf nodded slowly, then made a decision that showed in his straightening posture. Come. Our village is half a day's ride west. You will bring the sacred pony there. My people must see the truth with their own eyes." Ward exchanged glances with Lark and Sato. This was dangerous territory, literally and figuratively. Riding into an Apache village with evidence of the sacred pony's murder could go either way. They might be honored as truth-bearers or killed as convenient scapegoats. "Your chief will want blood payment," Ward said carefully. "We can't give him that. Whitaker escaped, and the men who hired him are beyond our reach." "My chief will want truth," Running Wolf corrected. "Blood payment comes after truth is known, not before. If what you say is real, that white men killed the sacred pony to start a war, then the war must be prevented. My people have fought enough battles we did not choose." The logic was sound, the risk enormous. Ward looked at his unlikely companions. Lark shrugged, leaving the decision to him. Sato nodded once, accepting whatever Ward decided. "We'll come," Ward said finally. "But the army needs to know what happened. I need to get word to Fort Benson." "One of my warriors will carry your message," Running Wolf offered. "He rides fast. Your Colonel Morrison will know before sunrise." They broke camp quickly, loading gear with practiced efficiency while Running Wolf's companions watched from their horses. Ward wrote a brief message to Morrison on paper torn from his notebook, explaining the situation, requesting he hold any military action until Ward returned with full evidence. He sealed it and handed it to the youngest of the Apache warriors, a man who couldn't have been more than 20. "Ride careful. Don't get shot approaching the fort." The young warrior grinned. "I have approached many forts without being shot. This one will be easy." He wheeled his horse and vanished into darkness, like smoke dispersing. The journey west began in silence. 6 riders and 1 travois moving through terrain that seemed designed to break bones and spirits. Ward had never ventured this deep into Apache territory before. Few white men had, and fewer still had returned to describe it. The land here was harsh, even by frontier standards. Razor-sharp stone, sparse vegetation, heat that felt personal in its intensity even at night. But there was beauty, too, if you had eyes to see it. The way starlight painted the rocks in shades of silver and shadow. The strange formations rising from the desert floor like monuments to forgotten giants. The absolute silence, so complete you could hear your own thoughts echoing. Running Wolf rode beside Ward, occasionally pointing out landmarks invisible to untrained eyes. A spring hidden beneath overhanging rock. A trail through what looked like impassable terrain. Places where his people had lived, fought, died, and endured. "You have family, Sheriff?" the warrior asked as they navigated a narrow canyon. "Wife. 2 daughters, both grown now. One married to a rancher near Tucson, others a schoolteacher in Phoenix." "You miss them." It wasn't a question, but Ward answered anyway. "Every day I'm gone, but this is the work. Somebody has to do it." The work of carrying dead animals through hostile territory, while criminals and conspiracies threaten from all sides. Running Wolf's tone held dry humor. "This seems like very specific work." Ward almost laughed. "I suppose it is. But it's still the work. Still the law, even when the law is inconvenient." "The law," Running Wolf repeated, tasting the word. "My people have laws too. Old laws given by ancestors, tested by time. But your people's law changes with convenience. A treaty promises peace, then is broken when land becomes valuable. Law promises justice, then is denied when justice is expensive." "I know," Ward said quietly. "I know the system fails more often than it succeeds, but that doesn't mean we stop trying to make it work." "Why not? Why not abandon broken systems and create something new?" "Because the alternative is chaos. The wilderness without even the pretense of justice. I've seen what that looks like, Running Wolf. It's not pretty." The Apache warrior considered this as they rode. "Perhaps, or perhaps your law is the wilderness, dressed in fine words to hide its teeth." Before Ward could respond, Lark's voice cut through from behind them. "I'm with the Apache on this one, Sheriff. The law's just another con game, except the house always wins." "Then why are you here?" Ward turned in his saddle to face the outlaw. "Why risk your neck for a dead pony in a conspiracy that doesn't benefit you at all?" Lark's grin was visible even in starlight. "Honestly, I'm still trying to figure that out. Maybe I'm getting sentimental in my old age. Maybe I just enjoy watching you tilt at windmills. Or maybe his tone shifted, becoming something closer to serious. Maybe I'm tired of being the villain in every story and wanted to see what playing hero feels like. How's it feel so far? Exhausting, unrewarding, likely to get me killed. Lark's grin widened. I can see why you do it, though. There's a certain satisfaction in standing for something other than yourself. Sato spoke from the darkness, his voice carrying quiet conviction. The samurai teaches that the warrior's path is found through service. Not service to self, but to something greater. Code, honor, principle. A man who serves only himself is not a warrior. He is merely armed. Deep thoughts for a midnight ride through Apache country, Lark observed. Though I suppose if we're going to die at dawn, we might as well philosophize our way there. We're not dying at dawn, Ward said with more confidence than he felt. We're delivering truth to people who deserve it. What happens after that is up to them. They rode through what remained of the night, the landscape gradually softening as they descended from high desert into a broad valley. Water appeared here, actual running water in a territory where liquid was more precious than gold. Cottonwood trees grew along a creek bed, their leaves rustling in the pre-dawn breeze. And nestled among the trees, almost invisible until they were nearly upon it, sat the Apache village. Ward had expected teepees, traditional nomadic structures he'd read about in army reports. Instead, he found a mixture of wickiups, dome-shaped brush dwellings, and more permanent structures built from stone and timber. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Dogs barked warnings as the riders approached. Children peered from doorways, dark eyes wide with curiosity and caution. The village wasn't large, maybe 40 structures, housing perhaps 200 people. But it was established, organized, clearly permanent, despite what army reports claimed about Apache being purely nomadic raiders. Running Wolf led them to the center of the village, where a larger structure stood. Outside it, a man waited, old, dignified, wearing a mixture of traditional and practical clothing that spoke to a life lived between worlds. Chief Red Hawk, Running Wolf said, dismounting, I bring the men who recovered the sacred pony, and I bring difficult truths. Red Hawk studied them each in turn, Ward with his badge catching the first hints of dawn light, Lark with his silver-streaked hair, and Outlaw's wariness, Sato with his foreign features, and Warrior's bearing. When his eyes reached the travois, his expression hardened. Show me, he said in English as clear as Running Wolf's. They uncovered the sacred pony's body, revealing the bullet wound, the professional killing, the deliberate murder disguised to look like something else. Red Hawk knelt beside it, one weathered hand touching the animal's neck, his face unreadable. The silence stretched until Ward thought it might break him. Around them, village residents gathered, men, women, children, elders, all watching, all waiting for their chief's judgment. Finally, Red Hawk stood. This is the third time white men have promised peace while preparing betrayal. First, when we signed the treaty at Canyon de Chelly, then when the reservation was established. Now this, he turned to Ward, give me one reason why I should not kill you and send your bodies back to the army as our answer. Ward met his eyes without flinching. Because killing us proves nothing except that we're all caught in the same trap. The men who did this, Harold Whitaker and whoever hired him, they want war. They want you to react with violence so the army has justification to destroy your village and take your land. Every Apache killed, every soldier killed, every drop of blood spilled, it all profits them. And you have proof of this? Ward nodded to Lark, who produced the saddlebags full of documents. They spread them on the ground before Red Hawk, ledgers, telegrams, correspondence, all of it damning evidence of conspiracy and premeditated murder. The chief examined each piece carefully, his literacy surprising Ward until he remembered his own prejudices and checked them. Red Hawk had probably dealt with more treaties, contracts, and legal documents than most frontier settlers. Understanding the enemy's language was survival. This telegram, Red Hawk said, holding up the one Ward had found. It mentions ensuring no witnesses. The diplomatic train had 13 soldiers, all dead, but it also had Apache scouts hired as guides. What happened to them? Ward felt ice slide down his spine. He'd seen the bodies at the train site, counted them, documented the massacre, but Red Hawk was right. Diplomatic missions through Apache territory always employed indigenous guides. Where were they? Running Wolf answered the question nobody wanted to ask. 3 days ago, bodies were found 20 miles from the train. 3 Apache scouts, all shot in the back. We assumed it was soldiers. Retaliation for something. No retaliation, Sato said quietly. Execution. The conspirators killed them to eliminate witnesses who might have revealed the truth. Red Hawk's face had gone stone hard. So they murdered our people to hide their crime, knowing we would blame the army, knowing the army would blame us, creating the exact conditions for war. Yes, Ward said. And if we give them that war, we give them everything they want. The chief stood silent, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. Around them, the village waited. Ward could feel the tension, the anger, the desire for blood payment that Running Wolf had mentioned. These people had lost friends, suffered injustice after injustice, endured broken promises and stolen land. One word from Red Hawk could unleash violence that would consume the entire territory. I will not give them war, the chief said finally. Not because I fear fighting. We have fought armies before and will fight armies again if we must. But I will not fight because criminals want profit. I will not make my people's blood into white men's gold. Relief flooded through Ward, but Red Hawk raised a hand forestalling premature gratitude. However, the chief continued, this cannot go unpunished. The sacred pony was a gift, a symbol of respect between peoples. Its death must be answered. The deaths of our scouts must be answered. If not with blood, then with justice. Your justice, Sheriff Ward, the law you claim to serve. I'll do everything in my power. No. Red Hawk's voice cut like a blade. Not everything in your power. Everything necessary. You will find the men who sent that telegram. You will bring them to account. You will prove that white man's law applies to white men's crimes. If you fail, if these conspirators escape unpunished, then we will know that your law is as worthless as every treaty we've signed. The ultimatum hung in the morning air, absolute and unyielding. Ward understood the stakes now. Not just preventing war, but proving the entire concept of justice meant something. That law wasn't just another tool of oppression, but could actually serve truth. It was a heavier burden than any strongbox. I'll find them, Ward said, and I'll see them answer for what they've done. Red Hawk nodded slowly. Running Wolf will take you back to the fort. You will give your Colonel Morrison this evidence. You will make him understand what has happened here, and you will not stop until justice is served. One question, Lark interjected, his tone unusually serious. What about the sacred pony? What happens to its body? Red Hawk looked at the white animal, still beautiful despite death, still carrying the weight of what it had represented. We will give it proper ceremony, honor its spirit, mourn what might have been. The dignitary who gave this gift, when you see his servant again, tell him we remember his kindness. Tell him we know the peace he offered was real, even if others made it impossible. Sato stepped forward and bowed deeply, the gesture carrying profound respect. I will carry your words back to the dignitary. He will grieve with you, and he will understand that true honor transcends the crimes of dishonorable men. They prepared to leave as the sun broke fully over the eastern horizon, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold. The village children had overcome their initial wariness and now surrounded the horses, fascinated by Sato's foreign appearance and weapons. The warrior bore their attention with patience, even demonstrating how to properly hold a sword when one brave boy asked. Running Wolf returned with fresh horses and supplies. Your animals need rest. Take these for the journey back. We will care for yours until you return. If we return, Lark muttered, but he accepted the exchange with good grace. As they mounted, Red Hawk approached Ward one final time. Sheriff, you wear your badge like armor. Like it will protect you from the wilderness, from corruption, from the chaos that wants to consume everything. But metal cannot stop what is coming. Only choice can. Only the decision, made moment by moment, to stand for something real. I know, Ward said. I've always known. Then prove it. Not to me, not to your army, not to your government. Prove it to yourself. Prove that the man who wears that badge is worthy of what it represents. They rode east as the sun climbed, 4 men now, Ward, Lark, Sato, and Running Wolf serving as guide. The Apache warrior set a brutal pace, knowing time mattered, Knowing every hour of delay increased the chance of Whitaker and his masters escaping justice. They reached Fort Benson by late afternoon, having ridden nearly 40 miles with only brief stops for water. Ward's message had preceded them. The young Apache warrior had delivered it successfully, and Colonel Morrison was waiting at the gate with a full honor guard. The colonel's face showed relief when he spotted Ward, but that relief faded as he took in the complete group. "Sheriff Ward, I got your message, though I'll admit it raised more questions than it answered. And you've brought—" He paused, seeing Running Wolf, seeing Sato, seeing Lark. Quite the delegation. "We have evidence, Colonel. Everything you need to understand what really happened, but we need to talk privately, now." Morrison nodded curtly. "My office. Your companions can wait in the mess hall. I'll have food brought." "Running Wolf comes with us," Ward said firmly. "This concerns his people directly. He has a right to hear everything." The colonel looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Ward's expression stopped him. "Very well. This way." Morrison's office was Spartan. Desk, chairs, maps on the walls. The accumulated paperwork of Frontier Military Command. Ward spread the evidence across the desk while Running Wolf stood near the door, watchful and silent. For the next hour, Ward laid out everything. The conspiracy, Whitaker's confession, the telegram proving premeditation, the murder of the Apache scouts, the death of the sacred pony designed to trigger war. Morrison read each document carefully, his face growing darker with each page. When Ward finished, the colonel sat back in his chair, looking suddenly older than his 50-some years. "This goes all the way to Denver, maybe farther." Morrison's voice was quiet, tired. "Railroad interests, mining consortiums, land speculators, they've been pushing for Apache removal for years. I knew there was political pressure, but this—" He gestured at the evidence. "This is conspiracy to commit mass murder." "Can you stop it?" Ward asked. "Can the Army act on this evidence?" "I can report it up the chain of command. I can recommend prosecution. But Sheriff, you have to understand the political realities here. The men behind this have connections, resources, lawyers. They'll claim Whitaker acted alone, disavow any knowledge, bury this in legal proceedings that could last years." "So they escape," Running Wolf said from the door, his voice flat. "Justice becomes another broken promise." "Not if I can help it," Morrison replied, surprising Ward with his vehemence. "I've spent 30 years in the Army. I fought in wars I believed in and wars I didn't. I followed orders I agreed with and orders that made me sick. But I draw the line at allowing criminals to manipulate my soldiers into committing genocide for profit." The colonel stood, gathering the evidence with careful hands. "I'll send this to the territorial governor and the War Department simultaneously. I'll include my own report, my recommendation for immediate investigation, and I'll make it very clear that the Apache Nation had nothing to do with the train attack or the murder of the sacred pony." "Will it be enough?" Ward pressed. "Honestly, I don't know. But it's what I can do within my authority." Morrison met Ward's eyes. "What you do outside your authority is your own business, Sheriff. I won't ask questions I don't want answers to." The implication was clear. Official channels would move slowly, might never deliver real justice. If Ward wanted to ensure accountability, he'd need to pursue it through less official means. They left Morrison's office as evening settled over the fort. Lark and Sato were waiting in the mess hall, both looking exhausted but alert. Running Wolf rejoined them, his face unreadable. "The colonel will do what he can," Ward told them, "but it won't be enough. Not fast enough, not thorough enough. The men in Denver who orchestrated this will disappear behind lawyers and political connections." "So we go to Denver," Lark said simply. "Track down whoever sent that telegram. Force a reckoning." "That's vigilante justice," Ward pointed out. "Everything I've spent my career opposing. Is it vigilante justice, or is it just justice when the official system fails?" Lark's question hung in the air. "You heard the colonel. Legal proceedings could take years. How many more conspiracies? How many more murders happen while we wait for bureaucracy to grind its way to truth?" Ward wanted to argue, wanted to defend the system he'd served for 23 years. But he thought about Red Hawk's ultimatum, about 13 dead soldiers and 3 murdered scouts, and 1 sacred pony killed for profit margins. He thought about his badge and what it was supposed to represent. Sometimes the law and justice weren't the same thing. Sometimes choosing between them defined who you really were. We'll need to move fast, Ward said quietly, the decision made. Whitaker's probably already sent word that the scheme failed. His employers will be covering tracks, destroying evidence, preparing defenses. I know people in Denver, Lark offered. Criminal contacts, yes, but well connected. They can help us identify who sent that telegram, where they are, how to reach them. Sato nodded once. I am sworn to see this through. Where you go, I follow. Running Wolf stepped forward. And I will return to my people. Tell Red Hawk that the white sheriff did not abandon justice, even when his own law failed him. This will mean something to my chief. Perhaps not everything, but something. They clasped forearms, warrior to warrior, in a gesture of respect that transcended culture. Then Running Wolf mounted his horse and rode west into gathering darkness, carrying word back to his village that the fight for justice continued. Ward, Lark, and Sato stood in the fort's courtyard, three unlikely companions bound together by stubborn refusal to accept that evil could triumph simply because it was well-funded. Denver's 5 days hard ride, Lark said. Maybe 4 if we push the horses. Then we ride tonight, Ward decided. Every hour we delay gives them more time to hide. They gathered supplies from the fort's quartermaster, food, ammunition, fresh horses. Colonel Morrison appeared one final time as they prepared to depart, pulling Ward aside. This isn't official army business, the colonel said quietly. If you're caught, I can't help you. Can't even acknowledge we had this conversation. I understand, sir. But unofficially, Morrison pressed a folded paper into Ward's hand. This is a letter of introduction to a federal marshal in Denver named Sarah Chen. She's honest, competent, and she hates corruption more than anyone I've ever met. If you need official support in Denver, she might provide it. Ward pocketed the letter, gratitude choking his words. Thank you, Colonel. Don't thank me. Just finish this. Prove that justice still means something out here. Morrison stepped back, saluting, not to Ward's badge, but to the man wearing it. Good hunting, Sheriff. They rode out of Fort Benson as stars emerged overhead, 3 men on a mission that had transformed from preventing war to pursuing justice in its rawest form. The frontier stretched before them, vast and indifferent, full of dangers both known and unknown. But somewhere in Denver, the men who'd orchestrated murder and conspiracy waited, thinking themselves safe behind wealth and position. They were about to learn different. Sheriff Caleb Ward touched his badge one final time, feeling the weight of what it represented, the burden of what he'd chosen. Then he spurred his horse forward into the gathering night, chasing truth through a wilderness that had never cared much for either law or justice, but would bend to both before this was finished. The hunt had begun. The ride to Denver consumed 4 brutal days that blurred into a single continuous nightmare of dust, exhaustion, and driving purpose. They pushed the horses harder than Ward liked, stopping only when the animals physically couldn't continue, sleeping in shifts, eating in the saddle. The landscape transformed as they traveled northeast, desert badlands giving way to rolling plains, then foothills, finally the towering peaks of the Rockies rising like stone sentinels guarding the approach to Colorado's capital. Lark knew the route intimately, which should have surprised Ward but didn't. The outlaw had probably fled to Denver a dozen times, using the city's anonymity to disappear between crimes. Now that knowledge served a different purpose, guiding them along paths that avoided army patrols and settlements where Ward's badge might raise questions he didn't have time to answer. They spoke little during the journey, each man locked in his own thoughts. Ward found himself replaying the confrontation at Angel's Rest, analyzing every word, every decision, wondering if he'd missed something crucial. The telegram haunted him. Those 3 initials at the bottom, HW, which Running Wolf had assumed meant Harold Whitaker, but which Sato had correctly identified as originating from Denver. Someone in that city had engineered 13 murders, had ordered the death of a sacred animal, had attempted to trigger a war that would have consumed hundreds, maybe thousands of lives, and that someone was still out there, still free, probably already planning their next move. The thought made Ward's jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. On the second night, camped in a narrow canyon with a fire burning low against the mountain cold, Sato finally broke the silence that had settled over them like snow. In my country, there is a concept called giri, duty, obligation, the debts we owe to others and to ourselves. The warrior stared into the flames, his face half shadow, half light. I came to this land thinking my deity was simple: protect the dignitary's gift, ensure the peace he sought. But the sacred pony is dead. The peace is broken. My duty should be complete. Should be? Lark prompted from where he sat cleaning his rifle. Yet I find myself still here, still riding toward danger with two men I barely know, pursuing justice for crimes that do not directly concern my master. Seto's eyes lifted to meet Ward's. I am trying to understand why. Ward thought about his answer while adding wood to the fire. Maybe because some debts aren't about obligation. Maybe they're about choosing who you want to be. Philosophy from a frontier sheriff, Lark observed with a tired grin. What's next, poetry? Mock all you want. Doesn't change the truth. Ward shifted, his back against cold stone, every muscle aching from days in the saddle. We all made choices that brought us here. You could have run when I took those chains off, Lark. Sato could have returned to his master after we recovered the pony's body. But you're both still here. I'm here because going to Yuma prison holds even less appeal now than it did before, Lark countered. This little adventure is just delaying the inevitable. Is it? Ward studied the outlaw's face in firelight. Because from where I sit, you've had a dozen chances to disappear. Could have vanished during the ride to Angel's Rest, or while shadowing me through the Badlands, or any night since. But you keep choosing to stay. Lark's grin faded, something more complicated replacing it. Don't read too much into it, Sheriff. I'm still a criminal. Still heading to prison when this is done. A few days of playing hero doesn't erase 5 years of robbery and fraud. Maybe not erase, but it might redefine. Ward pulled out the wanted poster he'd been carrying since arresting Lark. The paper creased and worn now, the sketch of Lark's face staring back at them. You know what I see when I look at this? Not just a criminal, a man who was smart enough to evade the law for 5 years, smart enough to read people, anticipate moves, survive in a world that wanted him dead or imprisoned. That's someone with skills, Lark, someone who could do remarkable things if those skills served something other than self-interest. You're not going to reform me with sentiment, Ward. Not trying to reform you, just pointing out that you've already started reforming yourself. Ward fed the wanted poster to the fire, watching Lark's face dissolve into ash and ember. The man who robbed stages wouldn't have risked his neck at Angel's Rest, wouldn't be riding to Denver to confront powerful criminals with nothing to gain except the satisfaction of seeing justice done. That's not the same person on this poster. Lark watched the paper burn, something unreadable flickering across his features. Sentiment and destruction of official documents. You're full of surprises tonight, Sheriff. I've got other copies back in my office, but that one felt appropriate to burn. Consider it symbolic. Of what? Second chances? Fresh starts? The idea that who we were doesn't have to define who we become. Sato nodded slowly. This is also part of Giri, the duty to become better than we are, to transform through action and choice. He looked at Lark directly. You mock the sheriff's philosophy, but you embody it. Every moment you choose to ride with us instead of flee, you are becoming someone new. Well, that's deeply uncomfortable, Lark muttered, but his grin held something genuine now. I preferred being the cynical outlaw. This introspection is exhausting. They slept in shifts that night, the mountains cold and unforgiving, the stars impossibly bright in the thin air. Ward took the last watch, sitting with his Colt across his lap, watching dawn break over peaks that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the passage of countless lives, the eternal struggle between justice and chaos. His thoughts drifted to his wife Sarah, back home in their small house on the edge of town. She'd be worrying by now, wondering why he hadn't returned from what should have been a simple prisoner transport. Ward had left her notes before, explanations for delayed returns, but this time felt different. This time he was chasing something bigger than routine law enforcement, and some part of him wondered if he'd ever make it back to tell her about it. He pulled out the small photograph he carried in his vest pocket. Sarah on their wedding day, young and radiant, smiling at a camera like it held all the promises of the future. 26 years ago now. 26 years of standing beside a stubborn lawman who kept choosing duty over comfort, danger over safety, principle over pragmatism. She'd never complained, never demanded he quit, never made him feel guilty for the life he'd chosen. But she'd also never hidden her fear when he rode into situations like this one. Ward touched the photograph gently, a promise to himself and to her. When this was done, when justice was served and the conspiracy broken, he'd ride home. And maybe, just maybe, he'd finally have that conversation about slowing down, about training a replacement, about spending his remaining years building something other than cases and arrests. But first, Denver. First, the men who'd engineered murder and war. First, proving that the badge he wore meant something real. The city appeared on the fourth afternoon, sprawling across the plains with the mountains as backdrop, a hub of commerce and corruption where the old frontier met the new industrial age. Denver had exploded in recent years, fed by mining wealth and railroad expansion, growing from rough settlement to something approaching Eastern sophistication. The streets here were paved in places, gas lamps replacing torches, buildings rising 3 and 4 stories tall. It was also, Ward knew from reputation, a place where money talked louder than law, where corruption ran deep as mine shafts, where powerful men could buy protection from consequence. They rode in separately, Ward's idea, reducing visibility, making them harder to track. Lark entered from the south, familiar with Denver's criminal networks, heading to make contact with informants. Sato approached from the east, planning to find lodging where his foreign appearance wouldn't attract undue attention. Ward came from the north, dressed as just another frontier lawman with business in the territorial capital. They'd agreed to meet that evening at a tavern Lark knew, the Silver Claim, an establishment that catered to miners and gamblers, where conversations could be had without attracting official notice. Ward stabled his horse at a livery near the city center, paying extra for good feed and a rub down the animal desperately needed after 4 days of hard riding. Then he made his way through Denver's crowded streets, observing, cataloging, feeling the pulse of a city balance between wilderness and civilization. Colonel Morrison's letter of introduction had given him a name and address, Federal Marshal Sarah Chen, office on Larimer Street. Ward found the building easily enough, a 3-story brick structure housing various territorial government offices. He climbed to the second floor, following signs until he reached a door with simple lettering. Marshal S. Chen, Territorial Investigations. He knocked twice. "It's open." Ward entered to find a woman in her early 40s sitting behind a desk covered in paperwork and evidence. She wore practical clothing, dark wool skirt, white blouse, vest, and her black hair was pulled back in a severe bun. But it was her eyes that caught Ward's attention. Sharp, intelligent, missing nothing as they assessed him from boots to badge. "Sheriff Caleb Ward," she said before he could introduce himself. "Colonel Morrison sent a telegram yesterday warning me you'd be coming. Close the door, please." Ward obeyed, suddenly aware of how trail-worn he must look, dust-covered, unshaven, exhausted from days of hard riding. Marshal Chen gestured to a chair, and he sat gratefully. "The colonel's telegram was cryptic," Chen said, her voice carrying Eastern education with Western directness. "Something about a conspiracy to provoke war, murdered diplomats, and evidence of high-level corruption. He suggested I give you whatever assistance I could while maintaining plausible deniability." That about covers it. Ward reached into his vest, producing the telegram they'd found in Whitaker's camp. This originated from Denver 4 days before the attack on the diplomatic train. "We need to identify who sent it." Chen took the paper, studying it with the intensity of someone who knew how to read between lines. "The routing code indicates it was sent from the main telegraph office downtown. That's public access. Anyone can walk in and send a message. But the sender's initials, HW, and the specific wording suggests someone with resources and familiarity with covert communication. Can you trace it?" "Possibly. The telegraph office keeps logs of all messages sent, including timestamps and sender information. Of course, people often use false names for sensitive communications." She set the telegram on her desk, aligning it precisely with the edge. "What exactly are you planning to do when you identify the sender, Sheriff Ward?" "Confront them. Get a confession. Bring them to justice." "Through official channels?" Ward met her eyes. "Through whatever channels work." Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. A subtle relaxation, like a decision had been made. "I've been investigating corruption in Denver for 3 years. Railroad interests, mining consortiums, land speculators. They've got their fingers in every level of government. Judges, prosecutors. even some federal marshals. They operate with impunity because they've bought protection. You sound frustrated. I am. I'm also realistic. She stood, walking to a filing cabinet and extracting a thick folder. Harold Whitaker. I've had a file on him for 18 months. Suspected involvement in claim jumping, witness intimidation, possibly murder for hire. But every time I get close to building a case, witnesses disappear or evidence vanishes. Someone powerful is protecting him. He confessed to orchestrating the train attack, Ward said. Admitted the whole conspiracy was designed to provoke war and clear Apache land for railroad expansion. Where is he now? Fled into the Badlands. Could be anywhere. Chen's jaw tightened. Without Whitaker in custody, any case we build is circumstantial. His employers will deny knowledge, claim he acted independently, bury us in legal proceedings that could last years. Unless we force their hand, Ward said quietly, make them reveal themselves. How? Ward had been thinking about this since leaving Fort Benson, an idea forming gradually like dawn breaking over desert. Whitaker was the foreman, not the architect. Someone hired him, funded him, gave him orders. That someone is still here in Denver, probably panicking now that the scheme failed. They'll be trying to cover tracks, eliminate evidence, distance themselves from the conspiracy, which makes them vulnerable, Chen finished, following his logic. Scared people make mistakes. Exactly. We find them, we pressure them, we offer them a choice. Confess and testify against their co-conspirators or face charges for everything from murder to treason. And how do we find them? Ward produced the second piece of evidence he'd been carrying, the ledger from Whitaker's camp, showing payments to various contractors and suppliers. Follow the money. Someone paid for those hired guns, those supplies, that entire operation. The payments had to come from somewhere. Leave a trail. Chen took the ledger, her eyes scanning the entries with professional speed. These accounts, I recognize some of them. Shell companies, false fronts. I've seen them before in other investigations. She looked up, something like excitement breaking through her professional demeanor. Sheriff, this ledger might be the key I've been missing. If I can connect these payments to legitimate businesses, trace them back to actual people. How long? Give me 12 hours. I'll need to access bank records, cross-reference with incorporation documents, call in favors from clerks who owe me. She was already making notes, her mind clearly racing ahead. Where can I reach you? The Silver Claim Tavern. I'll be there tonight with my associates. Associates plural? Ward almost smiled. It's a long story, but they're trustworthy, and we'll need all the help we can get when this comes to a head. Chen studied him for a long moment, weighing risks, making calculations Ward couldn't follow. Colonel Morrison vouched for you. Said you were a man who couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be deterred once you decided something was right. He also said you were stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery. The colonel's a good judge of character. He also said if I helped you, I should expect things to get very messy very quickly. That's probably accurate too. Chen gathered the telegram and ledger, securing them in a locked drawer. 12 hours, Sheriff. I'll have answers by then. What you do with those answers is your business, but I want to be there when it happens. Officially, I'm investigating telegraph fraud. Unofficially, she met his eyes with absolute clarity. I'm tired of watching powerful men commit crimes with impunity. If you're planning to change that, I want to help. Ward stood, extending his hand. Chen shook it firmly, her grip strong and steady. One more thing, Ward said at the door. The men we're after, they've already killed 16 people that we know of. Probably more. They'll kill again if they feel threatened. This could turn very dangerous very quickly. Sheriff Ward, I've been a federal marshal for 8 years. I've faced down claim jumpers, train robbers, and at least one genuine psychopath who collected ears as trophies. I understand dangerous. Her smile was brief, hard. But I appreciate the warning. Ward left the marshal's office feeling something he hadn't felt in days, hope tempered by partnership. Chen was exactly the kind of ally they needed, someone with official authority who wasn't afraid to bend rules when justice demanded it. He spent the afternoon walking Denver's streets, observing the city's rhythms, noting the locations of police stations, telegraph offices, banks, all the infrastructure that would matter if things went wrong. The city hummed with energy, with ambition, with the raw hunger for wealth and status that defined the New West. Somewhere in this sprawl of buildings and businesses, the conspirators who'd engineered murder hid behind respectability and power. They'd wake up tomorrow thinking themselves safe, thinking their money and connections made them untouchable. Ward touched his badge, feeling its familiar weight, and allowed himself a grim smile. They were about to learn different. The Silver Claim occupied a basement space on Blake Street, accessible via narrow stairs that descended into noise and smoke and the particular atmosphere of men drinking away either celebration or desperation. Ward found Lark already there, sitting at a corner table with a whiskey in hand and the careful posture of someone watching all entrances. The outlaw's eyes found Ward immediately, a subtle nod acknowledging his arrival. Ward ordered coffee, he needed to stay sharp, and joined Lark at the table. "Productive afternoon?" Lark asked quietly, his voice barely carrying over the ambient noise. "Very. You?" "I made contact with an old associate named Marcus Finch. He runs a gambling operation on the east side, hears everything worth hearing in Denver's underworld." Lark sipped his whiskey, eyes never still, constantly scanning the room. "According to Finch, there's been unusual activity in the past week. High-level meetings between railroad executives and mining interests, closed-door sessions with territorial legislators, a lot of money changing hands quietly." "Covering tracks," Ward said. "That's my read." Finch also mentioned that Harold Whitaker was known around Denver as a fixer for wealthy interests. Not the mastermind, just the implementer. The man who got his hands dirty while his employers stayed clean. "Did Finch have names, specific employers?" Lark's grin was sharp and satisfied. "He gave me 3 possibilities. Lawrence Harrington, president of the Continental Railroad Company. Margaret Ashford, majority shareholder in the Rocky Mountain Mining Consortium. And Theodore Blackwell, territorial land commissioner with a reputation for creative interpretation of property law." Ward absorbed this, pieces clicking together. Any of those 3 could have funded Whitaker's operation. All of them have motive. The railroad wants Apache land for expansion. The mining companies want access to mineral rights. The land commissioner profits from territory development. Exactly. The question is which one, or if all 3 conspired together. Lark finished his whiskey, signaling the bartender for another. "Finch suggested we be very careful. These are powerful people with private security, legal protection, and the kind of connections that make inconvenient investigators disappear. Good thing I'm too stubborn to disappear quietly." "That's what worries me, Sheriff. Your stubbornness might get us all killed." Before Ward could respond, Sato appeared at the table, materializing from the crowd with his characteristic silence. The warrior looked out of place in the tavern, too dignified, too composed, but he carried himself with such natural authority that nobody challenged his presence. "I have secured lodging at a boarding house on Champa Street," Sato reported, sitting. "The proprietor is Chinese, familiar with foreigners, asks no questions. I also observed the Continental Railroad offices. Heavy security, guards posted at all entrances, activity continuing past normal business hours." "Scared," Ward said. "They know something went wrong with Whitaker's operation. They're circling the wagons, which makes approaching them directly very difficult," Sato observed. Ward checked his pocket watch. 6 in the evening. Marshal Chen had promised answers in 12 hours, which meant 6 in the morning. Time to plan, prepare, maybe even rest before whatever came next. "We need to think this through carefully," he said, leaning forward so his voice wouldn't carry beyond their table. "We're about to confront people with enormous resources and no moral constraints. They've already murdered 16 people to protect their conspiracy. They won't hesitate to kill 3 more if we give them the opportunity." "So what's the play?" Lark asked. "Assuming Marshal Chen identifies the conspirators, assuming we know who sent that telegram, then what? We can't exactly arrest them ourselves. You're a county sheriff with no jurisdiction in Denver. I'm a wanted criminal, and Sato's a foreign warrior with no legal authority whatsoever." "We don't need to arrest them," Ward said. "We need to make them confess. Get testimony that implicates everyone involved. Documentation that proves the conspiracy. Once we have that, we turn it over to Chen and let official justice take its course." "And how exactly do we make them confess?" Ward met Lark's eyes. "The same way you've conned dozens of people over the years. We give them what they think they want, make them feel safe enough to reveal the truth, then spring the trap." Lark's eyebrows rose. Sheriff Caleb Ward, are you suggesting we run a confidence game on the conspirators? I'm suggesting we use every tool available, including deception when necessary. I'm corrupting you. This is wonderful. Lark's grin was pure delight. What exactly did you have in mind? Ward pulled out a piece of paper and began sketching the outline of a plan, his mind working through angles and contingencies. It was dangerous, required perfect timing, and had at least a dozen points where everything could go catastrophically wrong. But it was the best chance they had. They talked for hours, refining the plan, identifying weaknesses, preparing for complications. Sato contributed tactical considerations, his warrior's mind seeing defensive positions and escape routes. Lark added layers of psychological manipulation, understanding how to read people, exploit their fears and greed. By midnight, they had something approximating a workable strategy. And by the time Marshal Chen appeared at their table at 6 the next morning, looking exhausted but grimly triumphant, they were ready. I have answers, Chen said without preamble, sitting and spreading documents across the beer-stained table. The telegram was sent by Theodore Blackwell, the Territorial Land Commissioner. The payments in Whitaker's ledger trace back to shell companies controlled by Lawrence Harrington's railroad, and Margaret Ashford's mining consortium provided the initial funding that started the entire operation. All three, Ward said, satisfaction mixing with cold anger. They conspired together. It's even worse than that. Chen pulled out another document, this one an official-looking contract. I found this filed with the Territorial Land Office, dated 2 weeks before the train attack. It's a provisional agreement transferring Apache territory to joint railroad and mining development, pending resolution of current treaty obligations. They'd already planned how to divide the land before they'd even cleared the indigenous population. Ward stared at the contract, at the signatures of 3 people who'd engineered murder for profit, who'd been so confident in their conspiracy's success that they'd documented it in legal paperwork. This is everything we need, he said quietly. Proof of premeditation, proof of conspiracy, proof of motive. It's compelling evidence, Chen agreed, but it's still circumstantial. A good lawyer could argue the contract was speculative, that Whitaker acted without their knowledge, that the timing was coincidental. We need direct testimony, confession, something that proves they knew about and ordered the murders. Then we get it, Ward said. Tonight, all 3 of them, together, admitting what they've done. Chen's eyes narrowed. How? Ward explained the plan they'd developed, watching her expression shift from skepticism to understanding to something almost like admiration. That's either brilliant or insane, she said finally. Seems to be my specialty lately, Ward replied. Will you help? Marshal Sarah Chen looked at the evidence spread across the table, at the 3 unlikely men who'd somehow tracked a conspiracy from desert badlands to Denver's corridors of power, at the opportunity to finally deliver justice against people who'd operated above the law for too long. I'll help, she said. But when this is over, we do things by the book. Official arrests, proper charges, legitimate prosecution. Agreed, Ward said. After we get what we need. They spent the day preparing, each person playing their role. Chen used her official authority to gather additional information, secure warrants that would be enacted once they had confession, position resources for rapid response. Lark contacted his criminal associates, spreading rumors designed to reach specific ears, planting seeds of information that would bloom into action. Sato scouted the location they'd chosen for the confrontation, identifying entrances, exits, positions, and Ward sat in a cheap hotel room, writing a letter to his wife. If this went wrong, if the conspirators proved more dangerous than anticipated, if the plan fell apart, if any of 100 things failed, Sarah deserved to know why he hadn't come home, deserved to understand that he'd died trying to prove that justice mattered, that the badge meant something real. He sealed the letter and left it with the hotel clerk, instructions to mail it if Ward didn't return within 2 days. Then he went to finish what he'd started. The location they'd chosen was a warehouse on the edge of Denver's industrial district, abandoned now, far enough from the city center that noise wouldn't attract immediate attention. Lark's contacts had sent word to all 3 conspirators, carefully crafted messages suggesting Harold Whitaker had survived, was hiding in Denver, and wanted to meet his employers to demand additional payment for his silence. Greed and fear would bring them. The promise of silencing Whitaker permanently would ensure they came armed with both money and murderous intent. And Ward would be waiting. Darkness had claimed the warehouse district by the time Ward took his position in the shadows of the abandoned building. The structure loomed against the night sky, 3 stories of brick and rotting timber that had once processed ore from the mountain mines but now stood empty, a monument to failed enterprise, perfect for their purposes, isolated, forgotten, and large enough to stage the confrontation they needed. Sato occupied the catwalks above, invisible in the gloom, his presence marked only by the occasional creak of metal that could have been wind or settling structure. The warrior had positioned himself with clear sightlines to the main floor, close enough to intervene if violence erupted but far enough to remain undetected. Lark stood in the center of the warehouse floor, illuminated by a single lantern that cast his shadow long and distorted across the concrete. He dressed for the role. Expensive coat borrowed from one of his criminal contacts, hat tilted at just the right angle to suggest dangerous confidence. In the dim light, with his silver-streaked hair and weathered features, he could pass for Harold Whitaker if you didn't look too closely. Marshal Chen waited outside with 4 federal deputies, positioned to seal exits once the conspirators entered. She'd obtained emergency warrants based on the evidence they'd compiled, ready to execute arrests the moment they had confession. Everything hinged on the next hour. Ward checked his pocket watch, 8:45. The messages Lark's associates had delivered specified 9 o'clock. Any minute now, greed and fear would drive 3 wealthy conspirators into the trap they'd set. The first to arrive was Theodore Blackwell, the Territorial Land Commissioner. Ward heard the carriage before he saw it. Expensive wheels on cobblestone, horses that cost more than most frontier settlers earned in a year. Blackwell entered alone, or appearing to be alone, though Ward spotted 2 armed men taking positions outside the warehouse entrance. The land commissioner was a large man, running to fat middle age, dressed in a suit that probably cost what Ward made in 6 months. He carried a leather satchel and a derringer poorly concealed in his vest pocket. "Whitaker?" Blackwell's voice echoed in the empty space. "Show yourself." Lark stepped fully into the lantern light, keeping his face partially shadowed by his hat brim. "Evening, Commissioner, punctual as always." "You have nerve demanding a meeting after the disaster you created." Blackwell's tone carried more anger than fear, which Ward noted carefully. The man felt confident, secure in his position. That would need to change. "The entire operation collapsed. The Sacred Pony is dead, but the war we needed didn't materialize. Do you understand what that means?" "It means we need to adjust our timeline," Lark said smoothly, his voice pitched slightly lower, approximating Whitaker's educated cadence. "The Apache are still on their land. The railroad still needs that territory. Nothing fundamental has changed except our approach." "Our approach?" Blackwell laughed bitterly. "There is no our anymore, Whitaker. You've become a liability. The only question is how we eliminate that liability." Before Lark could respond, a second carriage arrived, this one even more ostentatious, painted black with gold trim. Margaret Ashford emerged, and Ward had to suppress his reaction. The woman was perhaps 60, silver-haired and aristocratic, moving with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no applied to her desires. She was accompanied by a private guard who made Blackwell's men look like children playing at security. "Theodore," she greeted coldly, not even glancing at Lark, "I see you couldn't resist the opportunity to clean up our mutual problem personally." "Margaret, charming as always." Blackwell's tone suggested they despised each other, united only by their conspiracy. "Where's Harrington?" "Right here." The third conspirator entered on foot, having apparently dismissed his carriage blocks away. Lawrence Harrington was younger than the others, maybe 45, with the lean build and hard eyes of someone who'd clawed his way to power and intended to keep it. He carried no visible weapon, but moved with the confidence of someone who didn't need to. "Well," Harrington said, finally looking at Lark, "Harold Whitaker, the man who cost us 16 dead bodies, a failed conspiracy, and considerable political embarrassment. I hope you have an excellent explanation for why we shouldn't simply kill you where you stand." This was the moment. Ward tensed in the shadows, hand on his Colt, ready to intervene if Lark's performance failed to convince. But the outlaw was in his element now, playing a role with the skill of someone who'd conned his way across the frontier for 5 years. Kill me, and you lose the only person who knows where all the evidence is buried, literally and figuratively. "What evidence?" Ashford's voice could have frozen whiskey. Telegrams, ledgers, correspondence between the three of you detailing every aspect of the conspiracy. I kept copies, insurance against exactly this situation. Lark's grin was pure Whitaker arrogance. You think I'd orchestrate something this complex without protecting myself? I'm many things, but I'm not stupid. You're bluffing, Harrington said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Am I? Then explain how I know about the provisional land agreement you filed 2 weeks before the train attack. The one transferring Apache territory to joint railroad and mining development. Rather damning evidence of premeditation, wouldn't you say? The three conspirators exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Ward could see the calculation happening, weighing risks, evaluating threats, deciding whether Whitaker was bluffing or genuinely held leverage. What do you want? Blackwell asked finally. What I was promised, $100,000 plus an additional $50,000 for my trouble and the risk I've absorbed. Lark gestured toward the satchel Blackwell carried. I assume you brought payment. We conclude our business, I provide the locations of all evidence, and we part ways. You proceed with whatever new scheme you're planning, and I disappear. Except you've proven unreliable, Ashford said. The plan was simple. Attack the train, kill the pony, blame the Apache, trigger military response. You managed to accomplish 2 out of 4. That's a 50% success rate, hardly worth additional compensation. The plan failed because that stubborn sheriff interfered. Ward from some nowhere county decided to play hero. Lark's voice carried convincing bitterness. Nobody anticipated he'd volunteer as courier, track the operation, expose the conspiracy. That was bad luck, not poor execution. Bad luck we're still managing, Harrington said. Ward disappeared into Apache territory with his evidence. He'll likely never emerge, and if he does, we have sufficient political capital to bury whatever accusations he makes. Ward felt cold satisfaction. They just confirmed knowledge of his investigation, his identity, his movements, everything Chen would need for charges of obstruction and witness intimidation. You're certain he won't be a problem? Lark pressed, drawing them deeper into confession. Quite certain, Blackwell said smugly. I've already filed reports with the territorial governor suggesting Sheriff Ward has gone rogue, possibly stolen the ransom money, likely fled to Mexico. By the time he returns, if he returns, his credibility will be destroyed. He'll be the criminal, not us. Clever, Lark admitted. And the Apache? How do you trigger the war now that the Sacred Pony Gambit failed? That's no longer your concern, Ashford said sharply. In fact, nothing is your concern anymore except providing the evidence you claim to possess. After I receive payment, you'll receive what you deserve. Harrington's hand moved toward his coat, and Ward knew the moment had come. The conspirators had shifted from negotiation to elimination. But Ward was faster. He stepped from the shadows, Colt drawn and leveled, his voice carrying absolute authority. Federal Marshal, nobody move. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Harrington's hand completed its motion, drawing a small pistol, swinging toward Lark. But Sato dropped from the catwalks like a ghost made solid, landing between them, his katana appearing in his hands with liquid speed. The blade intercepted Harrington's pistol arm, not cutting but deflecting, sending the weapon clattering across concrete. Blackwell reached for his derringer, but Lark was already moving, the outlaw's fist connecting with the land commissioner's jaw in a punch that dropped the fat man like a sack of grain. Ashford's private guard raised his rifle, searching for targets, and Ward made a split-second decision. He fired once, deliberately high, the bullet ricocheting off metal support beams with a sound like thunder. Drop it, or the next one finds flesh. The guard froze, weapon wavering, caught between training and self-preservation. I said drop it! The rifle hit the floor. Outside, whistles shrieked as Marshal Chen and her deputies stormed the building, sealing exits, securing the perimeter. Within seconds, the warehouse filled with federal marshals, weapons drawn, surrounding the three conspirators and their security. Chen appeared at Ward's side, her own weapon drawn, face set in lines of grim satisfaction. Theodore Blackwell, Margaret Ashford, Lawrence Harrington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, treason, and a list of other charges I'll be happy to recite while you sit in federal custody. But this is outrageous, Ashford sputtered, her aristocratic composure finally cracking. You have no evidence, no proof of anything except being lured to a meeting under false pretenses. Actually, we have extensive evidence, Chen interrupted, including your own confessions, which were recorded by witnesses and will be documented in official reports. She gestured toward Ward, Lark, and Sato. 3 witnesses, all prepared to testify about everything you said tonight. That's entrapment, Harrington protested, but his voice lacked conviction. No, that's justice, Ward said quietly, finally holstering his Colt. You orchestrated the murder of 16 people. You attempted to start a war that would have killed hundreds more. You did it for land, for profit, for your own enrichment, and you thought yourselves above consequence. We have lawyers, Blackwell said, climbing to his feet with as much dignity as a man could muster after being knocked unconscious. The best lawyers money can buy. You'll never make any charges stick. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But here's what will happen regardless of what your lawyers accomplish. Every detail of this conspiracy will become public record. The telegraph fraud, the provisional land agreement, the payments to Harold Whitaker, all of it. Denver's newspapers will have field days. The territorial governor will demand investigations. The federal government will send auditors. Even if you avoid prison, which I doubt, your reputations are destroyed. Your business ventures will collapse. Your political connections will evaporate. You'll be pariahs. The truth of this settled over the conspirators like grave dirt. Ward watched their faces transform from arrogance to understanding to something approaching despair. They'd gambled everything on a conspiracy they thought was perfect, on the belief that money and power made them untouchable. They'd lost. Marshal Chen's deputies secured the prisoners with professional efficiency, applying restraints, searching for weapons, reciting formal charges. The 3 conspirators were led away separately, Blackwell still dazed from Lark's punch, Ashford rigid with fury, Harrington silent and calculating, probably already planning legal defenses. When the warehouse finally cleared, only Ward, Lark, Sato, and Chen remained, standing amid scattered evidence and the aftermath of justice delivered. Well, Lark said into the silence, that was significantly more exciting than I anticipated. I think Harrington actually would have shot me. He would have, Sato confirmed. I saw the intent in his eyes before he drew. You are fortunate I was positioned correctly. My hero, Lark said with exaggerated gratitude, then turned to Ward. So what happens now, Sheriff? The bad guys are caught, the conspiracy is exposed, justice is served. Does this mean I get a reduced sentence? Perhaps parole? Maybe just a stern warning and a hearty handshake? Ward studied the outlaw who'd transformed over the past week from prisoner to partner, from criminal to something approaching ally. You're still going to prison, Lark. I can't change that. But I'll speak to the territorial judge, explain your cooperation, recommend leniency. Maybe 5 years instead of 15, that's the best I can offer. 5 years, Lark repeated, testing the words. Well, it's better than hanging, which is what I expected when you first slapped those chains on me. I suppose I'll take it. You did good work, Ward said. Tonight, at Angel's Rest, throughout this whole mess. You proved you're more than just a con man and a thief. Careful, Sheriff. Keep talking like that, and I might start believing in redemption. But Lark's grin held something genuine now, something that looked almost like respect. For what it's worth, riding with you has been educational. I've learned that principles aren't just pretty words. Sometimes they're worth fighting for, even dying for, if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Chen interjected. I still need all of you for depositions, testimony, probably weeks of legal proceedings. Try to stay alive until the trial, please. Sato bowed respectfully to the marshal. We will do our best. Though I must return to my master soon, the dignitary must be informed of what has happened, of the sacred pony's fate, of the justice that has been delivered. Tell him the peace he sought is still possible, Ward said. The conspiracy failed. War was prevented. His gift died, but what it represented survived. I will convey this. Sato turned to Ward, and the warrior's expression softened. You honor your badge, Sheriff Caleb Ward. In my country, we would call you a true samurai, one who serves principle above self. It has been my privilege to stand beside you. They clasped forearms, warrior to warrior, in a gesture that transcended culture and language. Then Sato gathered his weapons and departed into the Denver night, a foreign warrior carrying news of justice delivered on the American frontier. The next days blurred into a whirlwind of legal proceedings, depositions, and documentation. Ward spent hours with Marshal Chen, reconstructing the entire conspiracy from the train attack through to the warehouse confrontation. Lark provided detailed testimony about his criminal contacts, the messages he'd sent, the psychological manipulation he'd employed to lure the conspirators into confession. The Denver newspapers seized on the story with the enthusiasm of sharks finding blood in water. Headlines screamed about corruption, conspiracy, wealthy criminals brought low. Editorials demanded reform, accountability, justice. The territorial governor launched formal investigations. Federal auditors descended on railroad and mining company books. The provisional land agreement was voided, its authors exposed and discredited. Theodore Blackwell's political career evaporated overnight. Margaret Ashford watched her mining consortium collapse as investors fled and partners distanced themselves. Lawrence Harrington's railroad interests went into receivership, his board of directors voting unanimously to remove him. And through it all, Ward waited for the one piece that mattered most to him personally. Word from Fort Benson. Confirmation that Colonel Morrison had received the evidence, that the Army understood the truth about the train attack, that war with the Apache Nation had been definitively prevented. The telegram arrived on the fourth day, delivered to Marshal Chen's office, where Ward had essentially taken up residence. Morrison's message was characteristically brief but carried profound relief. Evidence received and verified. Stop. Military action against Apache canceled indefinitely. Stop. Peace. Treaty remains intact. Stop. Recommend Sheriff Ward for territorial commendation. Stop. Well done. Stop. Ward read it twice, letting the words sink in. 16 people had died. A sacred animal had been murdered. A massive conspiracy had nearly triggered war. But in the end, justice had prevailed. The law had meant something. The badge he wore had proven to be more than metal and symbolism. You did it, Chen said, reading over his shoulder. You actually prevented a war. We did it, Ward corrected. You, me, Lark, Sato, Running Wolf, Colonel Morrison, everyone who chose to stand for something real instead of accepting that corruption and violence were inevitable. Still feels strange, doesn't it? Winning. Chen smiled, but the expression held exhaustion. I've been fighting Denver's corruption for 3 years, watching criminals escape consequence over and over. This is the first time the good guys actually won. Savor it, Ward advised. Victories like this are rare on the frontier. The wilderness usually wins. But not today. No, not today. 2 weeks later, Ward stood in a territorial courtroom watching as Theodore Blackwell, Margaret Ashford, and Lawrence Harrington were formally sentenced. The charges were extensive. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted incitement of war, witness tampering, corruption. The evidence was overwhelming. Their expensive lawyers had managed to negotiate reduced sentences in exchange for full confession and testimony about their co-conspirators. But even reduced, the penalties were severe. Blackwell received 15 years in federal prison. Ashford got 20, her age and gender providing no protection from the judge's fury. Harrington, as the primary architect of the conspiracy, received 25 years. All three would likely die in prison. Ward felt no particular satisfaction watching them sentenced, no triumph in their defeat, just a quiet sense that balance had been restored, that the scales of justice had finally settled on the correct side. Victor Lark's sentencing came next, in a separate proceeding. Ward testified on his behalf, documenting the outlaw's cooperation, his courage, his transformation from liability to asset. Marshal Chen added her own testimony, praising Lark's critical role in exposing the conspiracy. The judge, a stern woman named Helena Wardstone, who'd seen every kind of criminal the frontier produced, listened carefully, reviewed the evidence, and rendered her decision. Victor Lark, you stand convicted of robbery, fraud, and various other crimes committed over a 5-year period. Under normal circumstances, I would sentence you to 15 years in territorial prison without possibility of parole. Judge Wardstone paused, her eyes finding Lark's. However, these are not normal circumstances. Your cooperation with law enforcement prevented a war. Your testimony helped convict 3 individuals who'd orchestrated murder for profit. Your actions, while not erasing your crimes, demonstrate capacity for redemption. Lark stood perfectly still, not even breathing, waiting. I therefore sentence you to 5 years in territorial prison, with eligibility for parole after 3 years pending good behavior and demonstration of continued rehabilitation. The judge's gavel fell. May you use this time wisely, Mr. Lark. The frontier has enough criminals. Perhaps you can become something better. As marshals led Lark away, the outlaw caught Ward's eye and flashed one final grin. Not mocking, not cynical, but genuinely grateful. Then he was gone, off to serve time that would hopefully transform him completely. Ward gathered his belongings from the courtroom, ready, finally, to leave Denver, to return home to Sarah and the life he'd left behind weeks ago. But Marshal Chen intercepted him at the courthouse steps. Before you go, there's someone who wants to meet you. She led him to a private office where an elderly man waited. Asian features, dignified bearing, expensive clothing that marked him as someone of considerable importance. Sato stood beside him, having apparently returned to Denver specifically for this meeting. Sheriff Ward, Sato said formally, may I present His Excellency, Ambassador Kenji Tanaka, the dignitary whose gift was stolen and whose peace offering was murdered. Ward bowed awkwardly, unsure of proper protocol but wanting to show respect. The ambassador returned the bow with perfect grace. Sheriff Ward, Tanaka spoke in excellent English, only slightly accented. My servant Kenjiro has told me everything. How you volunteered to carry the ransom, how you tracked the conspiracy, how you risked your life multiple times to recover the sacred pony and deliver justice. I am deeply grateful. I'm sorry we couldn't save the animal, Your Excellency. Sorry, the peace you sought was broken. The animal died, yes, but the peace survived because of you. The treaty remains intact. War was prevented. Trust between peoples, while damaged, was not destroyed. Tanaka reached into his coat, producing a small wooden box. In my country, we have a tradition of honoring those who serve with courage and integrity. I would like to present you with this. Ward opened the box to find a beautifully crafted medallion on a silk ribbon, metal engraved with symbols he didn't understand, but which carried obvious significance. It is called the Medal of Distinguished Service, Tanaka explained. In my homeland, it is given to warriors who exemplify the highest principles of honor, courage, and selfless duty. You are the first foreigner to receive it. Wear it knowing you have earned the respect of a grateful nation. Ward felt his throat tighten, emotion threatening to overwhelm his frontier stoicism. Your Excellency, I don't know what to say. Say you will continue to serve as you have served. Say the badge you wear will always represent true justice, not convenience or corruption. Say that men like you will ensure the frontier, despite its violence and chaos, becomes a place where honor matters. I'll do my best, sir. That's all I can promise. That is enough, more than enough. Tanaka bowed deeply, and Ward returned it, holding the medallion like the precious gift it was. Outside the office, Sato walked Ward to his horse. Justice, finally retrieved from the Denver livery and rested enough for the journey home. You're staying with the ambassador? Ward asked. For now. He wishes to continue building bridges between our nations, despite what happened. I will serve that goal as I can. Sato smiled, a rare expression from the normally stoic warrior. But I will always remember the stubborn sheriff who taught me that American honor is as real as any samurai code. That principle transcends culture. And I'll remember the foreign warrior who watched my back when I needed it most. Ward extended his hand and Sato shook it firmly. If you're ever in my territory again, look me up. I'll buy you a drink and we'll tell lies about our adventures. I would enjoy that very much. Ward mounted Justice, feeling the familiar comfort of saddle and reins, the promise of open road and eventual home. Denver stretched behind him, city of corruption partially cleansed, conspiracy exposed and defeated, justice delivered despite overwhelming odds. The frontier waited ahead. He rode south for 5 days, retracing the route that had brought him to Denver, passing through landscapes that had become familiar during the desperate ride north. The mountains gave way to foothills, foothills to plains, plains to desert. The air grew hotter, the horizon wider, the sky bigger. Home territory. On the 6th day, Ward reached the small town where he'd served as sheriff for 23 years. Main Street looked exactly as he'd left it. Dusty, quiet, unremarkable in every way except that it was his. The place he'd chosen to make his stand for law and order in a wilderness that respected neither. He stabled Justice at the livery, paid the owner for excellent care, and walked the 3 blocks to his house. Sarah was in the garden, tending tomatoes, wearing the wide-brimmed hat she favored against the sun. She must have heard his footsteps because she turned, and the expression that crossed her face, relief, joy, exasperation, love, made every dangerous mile worth it. "Caleb Ward," she said, hands on hips. "You've been gone almost a month. I've been worried sick." "I know, I'm sorry. It got complicated." "It always gets complicated with you." But she was already moving toward him, and when she reached him, her arms went around his neck and her face buried in his shoulder. "I got your letter, the one you left with that hotel in Denver, the one saying goodbye in case you didn't come back. I didn't want you wondering. I would have preferred you not going somewhere that required a goodbye letter." Sarah pulled back, studying his face, seeing things he couldn't hide. "You look older, tired. What happened out there?" Ward thought about how to explain. The train massacre, the sacred pony, Angel's Rest, the conspiracy that had reached from desert badlands to Denver's corridors of power, the unlikely allies, the desperate gambles, the moments where everything balanced on knife edges of chance and courage. "I stopped a war," he said finally, "arrested some bad people, did what the badge required. And nearly got yourself killed in the process, I'm guessing." "Maybe, a couple of times, but I'm here now, home. Safe." Sarah studied him for a long moment, then shook her head with a mixture of exasperation and acceptance. "Come inside. You need a bath, a proper meal, and about 3 days of sleep. Then you can tell me the whole story, every detail, and I'll decide whether to be proud of you or furious with you." "Can it be both?" "With you, it's always both." They walked inside together, and Ward felt something settle in his chest. The tension he'd been carrying for weeks finally releasing, the weight of duty temporarily lifted. The badge would call again, the frontier would present new challenges, justice would require new sacrifices. But not today. Today, he was home. The next morning, Ward walked to his office, a simple building on Main Street with a sign reading "Sheriff," and a single cell in back for the occasional drunk or claim jumper. His deputy, Tommy Briggs, looked up from paperwork and nearly fell out of his chair. "Sheriff, we heard you were in Denver, and then there were rumors about some big conspiracy, and nobody knew if you were alive or—" Tommy stopped, catching his breath. "It's good to see you, sir." "Good to be seen, Tommy." Ward hung his hat on its familiar peg, settled into his chair behind a desk covered in routine paperwork. "What'd I miss?" "Compared to whatever you were doing, nothing. Mrs. Henderson's cow got loose again. The Martinez brothers got into a fistfight over a card game. Real exciting stuff." Ward smiled, finding comfort in the routine, in problems that could be solved with common sense and calm words rather than gunfights and conspiracy investigations. Sometimes boring is exactly what's needed. He spent the day catching up on administrative work, reviewing reports, making sure the town had been properly served during his absence. And in the evening, he walked to the edge of town where the desert began, watching the sun set over terrain he'd spent decades protecting. A figure approached from the shadows, running wolf, appearing as silently as ever, somehow knowing exactly where Ward would be. "Sheriff Ward," the Apache warrior greeted. "I heard you returned. I wanted to bring word from my chief. How's Red Hawk?" "Satisfied. The conspirators are imprisoned. The truth is known. The army understands we were not responsible for the train attack. Peace holds." Running Wolf's weathered face showed something close to contentment. "My chief asked me to tell you that you honored your promise. You proved white man's law could serve justice. This matters more than you know." "It matters to me too," Ward said quietly. "I needed to prove it to myself as much as to your people. Chief Red Hawk also wanted me to give you this." Running Wolf produced a small leather pouch, beautifully crafted, decorated with beadwork that caught the fading light. "It contains earth from the place where we buried the sacred pony. In our tradition, carrying earth from a sacred site brings protection and reminds us of what we fight to preserve. He thought you should have it." Ward accepted the pouch with reverence, understanding the profound gift it represented. Tell your chief I'm honored, and tell him I'll keep fighting to make sure what we built together, this fragile piece, survives. He knows, we all know. Running Wolf clasped Ward's forearm in the warrior's grip they'd shared before. The frontier is changing, Sheriff. Men like you and me, we're becoming rare. But as long as some of us remain, as long as we choose honor over convenience, maybe the change won't destroy everything worth preserving. They stood together watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and crimson, two men from different worlds united by shared commitment to something bigger than themselves. Then Running Wolf disappeared into the gathering darkness, and Ward was alone with his thoughts and the weight of everything that had happened. He pulled out the medallion Ambassador Tanaka had given him, studying it in the last light. The symbols remained mysterious, but their meaning was clear enough. Recognition that courage and integrity transcended borders, that the principles he'd fought for mattered not just in his small territory, but in the larger world beyond. Ward slipped the medallion into his vest pocket beside his badge, two pieces of metal that together represented everything he believed in. The frontier was indeed changing. The wild places were being tamed, the lawless spaces mapped and settled, the chaos slowly giving way to civilization. Someday soon, men like Ward would no longer be necessary. The badge would become ceremonial rather than essential, symbol rather than shield. But that day hadn't arrived yet. And until it did, Sheriff Caleb Ward would keep wearing his badge, keep serving the law, keep proving that justice meant something even when, especially when, the wilderness tried to laugh it away. He turned from the desert and walked home through streets growing quiet in evening shadow, past houses where families gathered for dinner, past the church where the bell rang softly, past the school where tomorrow children would learn about law and order and the fragile structures that separated civilization from chaos. Sarah was waiting on the porch, as he'd known she would be, patient and permanent as the mountains themselves. "Long day?" she asked. "Long month," Ward corrected, settling into the chair beside her. "But I'm done now, really done. Whatever comes next, someone else can handle it." Sarah's eyebrow rose. "Are you actually saying you're ready to slow down? Maybe train a replacement? Possibly even retire before you're too old to enjoy it?" "I'm saying I'm thinking about it. Seriously thinking about it." Ward took her hand, feeling calluses earned from garden work and household management, anchor points to the life they'd built together. "I've spent 23 years proving that the badge means something. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's someone else's turn." "I'll believe it when I see it," Sarah said, but she squeezed his hand. "Though I have to admit, the idea of you home more often, not chasing conspiracies and risking your life in the Badlands, I could get used to that." They sat in comfortable silence as night settled fully, stars emerging one by one overhead, the same stars that had witnessed everything: the train massacre, the confrontation at Angel's Rest, the warehouse showdown in Denver, all of it. Ward thought about the unlikely companions he'd ridden with: Lark, serving time in prison but hopefully becoming someone better; Sato returned to his master's service, carrying honor across cultures; Running Wolf and Chief Redhawk holding their people together in the face of pressures that would have broken lesser leaders; Marshal Chen continuing the fight against corruption in Denver; Colonel Morrison steering the army toward justice rather than expedient violence, all of them choosing to stand for something real when it would have been easier to walk away. The frontier had thrown them together through circumstance and crisis, forged them into allies through shared danger, bound them through the simple decision to do what was right regardless of cost. And now they were scattered again, each returning to their own lives, their own struggles, their own corners of a changing world. But they'd left their mark on the territory, on the conspiracy they'd broken, on each other. Proof that even in the wilderness, even in the lawless spaces where chaos threatened to consume everything, courage and integrity could still prevail. Sometimes the good guys actually won. Sometimes justice meant something. Sometimes a stubborn sheriff with an outdated belief in badges and law could make a difference that echoed beyond his small territory, rippling out to touch lives he'd never meet, changing trajectories he'd never see. Ward touched his badge one final time that night, feeling its familiar weight, its promise and burden. Then he went inside with his wife, to the home they'd built, to the life that waited beyond duty and danger. The frontier would call again someday. Challenges would arise, justice would need serving. But tonight, Sheriff Caleb Ward was exactly where he belonged, and that was enough.